I'm going to call the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting to order for Tuesday, June 1st, 2021. We were just in executive session, so let me ask Peter the question, which I don't think I asked last time. Has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Great. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from May 18th. I trust that all the select board members had a chance to review. And does anyone have a motion?
Move to approve the minutes of May 18th.
Our clerk has made a motion to approve the minutes of May 18th. All select board members in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 5-0, the motion has passed. As the chair, I have no remarks, but I will note that there are a lot of important business tonight, so you'll hear enough from us all, I'm sure. Does the manager have comments they would like to make?
Thank you. Just one. I hadn't planned to make comments tonight, but I became aware this afternoon of a situation where there had been some confusion between the town manager's office and town departments regarding the process of advising incumbents about the necessity to apply to be reappointed to town boards and commissions. And this came to my attention too shortly before the meeting for me to really be able to understand the full extent of how the communication may have broken down. And I would just ask that in order to make sure that the playing field stays level for everyone involved and benefit of the community and the appointments that you're going to make, that you defer that item in its entirety. There are appointments at the end of your agenda tonight. I'm just asking that you please defer that to September 15th. We'll make sure that everybody's properly informed about everything, and you'll have, the full complement of applications before you that night to make your decisions and make your appointments.
Great, Peter, do we have to make a motion to that effect, or is it just?
You could do that just by way of changing your agenda. If you wanted to do that now as a way to alert the public that when you get to that point, you're not going to take that item up. That would be staff's recommendation.
Great. Daniel, did you want to say something?
Peter, you said September.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I'm assuming
June.
you meant June.
Yeah, I sure did.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Very good.
June 15th. Yeah, these it would be just 2 weeks. This would all be in front of you on June 15th. Sorry about that.
Great. So we are changing the agenda under item 9, new business, to remove letter E, town committees and boards, until June 15th. Are we all in agreement? Very good.
Yes.
All right. Are there select board comments and committee reports? Yes, Ian.
Just one comment. Today is June 1st, which means Friday is the first Friday of the month, which means it's gallery walk time. I went to the first one. It was so great. So I really encourage everybody to get down there and support local artists and local shops. And hopefully the weather will be good. I haven't checked yet.
Don't
Very
check.
nice. Jessica?
Thanks, Liz. I just want to acknowledge that it's June, it's Pride Month. I've hung my colors in honor of the beautiful month, and I just want to acknowledge and honor the LGBTQ community in Brattleboro that has been here for a long time and contributed to the activism scene, the arts scene, and all the wonderful wins for their community and other communities that they support in a beautiful collaborative way. And I want to give a great shout out to Out in the Open, which is building community in the rural LGBTQ community and is right here in Brattleboro.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're here.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, let's ask members of the public if there's a comment they would like to make about an item that is not on tonight's agenda. And I see someone named Joshua Ferguson with his hand up. Joshua?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi,
This weekend, I met with a young man. I believe he was a former student of Brattleboro High School, and he had shared the story and some reports about the action that the town was looking to take to rededicate and rectify the Brattleboro Monument in relation to the Civil War veterans in the town. So I wanted to just learn about the status of that and if it was possible that we could somehow take the steps for either a symbolic action or some measure for in advance of Juneteenth in the spirit of that rectification. That's just something that I wanted to bring to the attention and on behalf of this young man and other students who worked on that effort.
Thank you, Joshua. Peter,
Thank
can you address the status of that?
Sure. So there are a group of people working on this together that include 3 of the students who have done research and the teacher who has led the research that they've done, Joe Rivers. It's a BAM's social studies teacher who's worked with these 3 students and many others over the years on this matter. And we've been working together for a while. We're actually in the stage right now where we're preparing draft language for what we intend to propose as a new plaque that will be placed, if the select board approves this, probably a few months from now, I would think. Unfortunately, we won't be able to complete this by June 14th, but we are actively working on it at this moment and have been working on it intermittently over the last year or so. The plan is now to move without an interruption to completing draft language and a plan for how a plaque can be placed near the existing monument that would interpret the existing monument. So it will describe the omissions and describe the basis for the omissions, what the research has shown about the fact that there are, there's racism and classism that is at the root of the incorrect information on the monument, and then tell some additional information about the findings of the research to correct the record. What we anticipate is that this plaque, there's so much information to share. We think this plaque is not likely to be able to tell the whole story, but it's going to be able to call out to the public's attention the errors on the original monument and enough of the context for that to hopefully have people want to learn more. And there will be either websites and or QR codes that would be included in the new plaque that would lead people to where they can learn much more about the history of this matter, both in Brattleboro and more broadly.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Joshua, for your question. Any other public comment? All right, I don't see any other little hands. So let's move to the consent agenda. Peter, would you like to present the consent agenda?
Sure. So the 3 items on the consent agenda this evening are the annual dog warrant, which is a procedural matter that the select board is required to do by state statute each year that documents the dogs that have not yet been licensed that we know to have resided or be residing in Brattleboro based on prior records and prior licensing. So each year an owner has to either relicense their animal or let the town clerk's office know if the animal has been given away or has died. And at this time of year, there's always a list. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. There's a list that's been provided to you in advance of this meeting that identifies those dogs that have not yet been licensed for this year. And state statute requires that you approve the dog warrant so that it empowers the town's animal control officer to enforce the ordinance that requires licensing of dogs for public health reasons and protection against rabies and so on. That's one item. The second is the reappointment of the tree warden, which is something that's never required select board action before, but it's a change in state statute that now does require an annual appointment of a town tree warden. Our tree warden in Brattleboro has been performing that service for about 25 years and is interested in continuing to. He's been a real asset to us in various projects and just dealing with situations that arise when there are trees that are considered dangerous in certain public areas, and we need his advice. So we're asking that you reappoint the tree warden. And there's a small reimbursement of a little better than 800,000. I wish it was 800,000. About $800 for the state of New Hampshire has a law that says that when one fire department comes to the aid of another fire department at a brush fire, they are eligible to be reimbursed for the expenses incurred. We did this in support of an incident over in Hinsdale, New Hampshire, some weeks ago. Have completed the paperwork necessary to receive the $800 reimbursement from the state of New Hampshire. And so that item is on here for your approval so that we submit that to gain that reimbursement. That's the consent agenda for tonight.
Great. Is there any comment from select board members? Yes, Ian?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Great. Ian has moved to present the consent agenda as presented, and all select board members in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, 5-0. The motion is carried. So the next item is we need to convene as water and sewer commissioners. Yes, Peter?
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I noticed that it's 6:32, and if you convene as water and sewer commissioners, I think we'll probably, spend a little bit of time on that item that you're going to deal with as water and sewer commissioners. So I thought you might want to skip over that item for now and go to the senator. And
I
then come
certainly
back.
would. Great idea. All right. I am delighted, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Brattleboro's own State Senate President Pro Tem, Becca Balint, to discuss the state budget and ARPA funding. Hello,
Hi,
Becca.
Liz.
Hi, Becca.
Hello, Daniel. Hi, Ian, Tim, Jessica. Nice to see you, Peter. Thank you for interpreting, Elizabeth. I will try not to go too fast. I know that I often talk fast. So I have been trying to cull through all of this information. There's a lot of it, as you can imagine, as we look through the budget and the ARPA funds. So I want to make it worth your while. So I thought what I might do, if it's okay with you, Liz, is to start with sort of some general budget highlights and then do a little bit deeper dive on the ARPA funds, and then take some questions as much as I'm able to answer. I know you at the municipal level are trying to figure out how you navigate the decisions before you and how best to spend the money. And I can tell you, I know how difficult it is, because that's what we've been struggling with for the last 15 months, is trying to get it right at the state level. So if that makes sense, I'll start with just a brief overview of budget, some budget highlights, and some of the ARPA funding. And if at any point I'm going too fast, slow me down. And I'm going to try to only touch on the ARPA funds that I feel like are of particular interest to you at the town level. There are a lot of funds that I don't think is a good use of our time to talk about, but that doesn't mean that I can't send you more information later. So for those with us on the call and those who will be watching either as we do this or later on, basically the budget that we passed amounts to about $7.35 billion of spending, which in Vermont terms, like, that's a massive budget. We don't usually have that kind of money to spend. The ARPA funds, so the American Rescue Plan Act funds that we appropriated as part of this budget, amount to about $600 million. Now, this does not include the coronavirus relief funds that we spent last biennium, and it does not include what we anticipate will be further funds coming from an infrastructure package from the federal government in the fall. We have somewhere between $500 and $400 and $500 million more dollars of ARPA funds that we've not dedicated to particular funding. Okay, so if I go through kind of quickly, when you look at the total amount of investment in the economy and the workforce and communities, generally falls under that umbrella at our Agency of Commerce, it amounts to about $158 million. Over $109 million of that is ARPA funding. So without that, just to give folks an idea, without the ARPA funds, we would have only spent about $50 million of general funds, which is what we put on top of the ARPA funds. When you look at the housing investments we've been able to make, it's really staggering, $150 million that we've dedicated from the American Rescue Plan specifically for housing. And I'll get more into the specifics of that in a minute. Another $66 million in technology modernization. It's something that's been of concern for us at the state level for many years. Our systems for Department of Labor obviously have been in the news a lot this year, but it's true across state government that we need further investments there. A lot of money put in climate action. And again, I can talk more specifically about how that impacts Vermonters at the local level. Clean water investments totaling $120 million, and other funding related to tax conformity and administration of these funds. What is of interest to you, I think, particularly related to the budget and not necessarily ARPA, is that we've also dedicated a 3% increase to mental health and developmental disabilities and choices for care. So that, is not an ARPA expense, it's general fund dollars, but that's important because that impacts people in our community. We also made sure that we dedicated an additional $2.7 million from general fund to increase the reach out benefit, which has been flat for a really long time. So that's huge. That's something that was really important to the Senate Appropriations Committee. So it would bring a 3-member household benefit up on average, over $100 increase, which, as you know, is significant for so many families that haven't had an increase in a very long time. We have funds for childcare investments. I'm just needing to, I have my chief of staff calling me. We had the governor veto 2 bills tonight, so I'm juggling a lot. So my apologies there. A lot more investments in Vermont state colleges, which I'll get to in a moment. But that's sort of just a high level take on budgetary investments. And now when we look specifically at ARPA funds that you may be interested in at the town level in terms of you figuring out how you want to invest the money you have. So just going through, and I'll just try to give you the specifics, and I'll try not to go too fast. And if you need me to follow up later with more specifics, let me know. So from the ARPA funds, we've dedicated $5 million to Dale so that's Department of Aging. You've got specifically for adult day services. Okay, so that will be something that you could apply for those grants related to operating costs, program infrastructure, and any other COVID-19 related costs for adult day services. I think you'd want to know that we have also allocated $9 million to the judiciary specifically for backlog dealing with child support services, addressing the evictions backlog, from the pandemic related moratorium there, and also fiscal issues related to the work that we've done on the expungement caseload. Another more than $3 million going to states attorneys and sheriffs locally to deal with essentially justice system opening back up again over a very long, prolonged shutdown for many cases. We have $2 million going specifically to Department of Labor for apprenticeship programs. So again, thinking locally about recently graduated students, but also incumbent workers who may want to take advantage of those services. Another $2 million allocated for courses that can be taken, again, by either recent graduate or incumbent workers looking for Vermonters whose employment was impacted by COVID in some way. Another $3 million allocated to degree completion for folks who started their education, never finished. We're looking at people who have at least 40 credits toward a degree, but have a gap of a year or two in their learning. And so specific grants related to them to get their degrees finished up. So I think most people watching this, I know everyone on the select board knows this, we have an incredible workforce shortage across the state, and you're going to hear a variety of grants and programs related specifically to additional training, more certifications, getting people more education so they can re-enter the workforce. Related to this, another $5 million set aside for what we call last tuition dollars. So for undergraduate studies for what we're calling critical occupations. So I'll list some of them here: bookkeeping certifications, IT service, production technicians, graphic design certificates, software and web design certificates, electrical and plumbing, dental hygiene, accounting, small business management, radiological science, respiratory therapy, and then if there's money additionally that is left over once we meet the undergraduate demand for these grants, they may go to specific master's degree programs, and ones that I think you would be most interested in is the counseling and the clinical mental health master's degrees. I want to make sure I haven't forgotten. There's also $540,000 specifically set aside for paramedic and EMS training, practical nursing, childcare training, again, for mental health counseling as well. I'm going to skip ACCD and we'll go back to that. There is also more money, $5.75 million going to VSAC specifically for various grant programs for students. Another $2 million going for working lands programs, which locally people may want to take advantage of. And another $1.15 million to the Vermont Council on the Arts for technical assistance for cultural and arts organizations, specifically for a digital presence. So obviously, given the area that we live in, there may be many organizations here that are going to want to take advantage of that. So going back to this issue of additional training, there is $100,000 set aside for the CTE programs, career technical education sites for adult training scholarships. Another $300,000 for equipment and curriculum grants, again for CTEs. You got $150,000 of grants specifically for BIPOC businesses for technical assistance and outreach. An additional $20 million for economic recovery grants, and $2 million in addition for micro business recovery assistance. And then there are some smaller things that you as a town might take advantage of, the $1.5 million for the Better Places grants which I'm sure, Peter, you're well aware of that, as others on the select board might be as well. So going back to the housing pieces that I mentioned earlier, you've got 94 million specifically to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to provide housing and shelter capacity. And that specific chunk of change is designed to give priority to those who are going to be displaced from the hotel voucher program or are currently unhoused. Sub-grants of that can also go to the Department of Housing and Community Development or the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. We've got an additional 5 million that is going to be dedicated to the VHIP program. You may be familiar with that. It is a program that allows landlords to get more units back online that have fallen either into disrepair or not up to code, so they can apply to grants to bring those rentals back online. Another $40 million from general funds, so not ARPA, but I just want you to be aware of the sheer volume that's going specifically into affordable housing initiatives. Another 36 million for emergency rental assistance, and 15 million rental assistance for those Reach Up families that I mentioned earlier that also are getting a boost in the Reach Up grant. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on the climate piece, except to say there is quite a bit of money available for weatherization programs, which I think a lot of folks in Windham County will want to take advantage of that. So you've got 4 million going to home weatherization assistance through DCF, another 9 million being channeled through Vermont Housing and Finance Agency for a weatherization financial program, another 5 million going to the Department of Public Service to passing through there to go to Efficiency Vermont for more weatherization initiatives. So really putting a lot of money specifically into weatherization for moderate and lower income households throughout Vermont. And then related to that, another 2 million going for workforce development around weatherization. So I know I went through that pretty quickly. I wanted to talk about just I went back to talk to the Joint Fiscal Office to try to give you some more guidance around how you can spend the dollars that are coming your way. I'm sure you all know this, but I'll just say it for the people watching, that this money specifically going to municipalities, state, local, and tribal governments is specifically to respond in some way to the public health emergency that we've all been through and its negative impact on the economy, on households, on small businesses, on nonprofits, and specific aid can be targeted to industries that have been hardest hit. So here in Southern Vermont, it will be no surprise to hear that we know the tourism, the travel, and the hospitality industry has been really hard hit. And specifically the wedding industry in particular, I know is looking to hopefully have a better season than last season. So it also can go to respond to workers performing essential work, both during the COVID-19 public health and emergency, and for providing premium pay to some of those workers. And there is a provision around sort of filling gaps related to revenue shortfalls related to the COVID-19 emergency, as I'm sure you're well aware. We've had quite a few people asking about at the state level, might we be able to invest some of this money in public pensions? And the answer is no, we're forbidden from doing that. But you can make additional necessary investments locally for water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So I gave you a lot of information. I hope that's helpful. I can certainly send you, Liz, my notes and any other links from the Joint Fiscal Office that might be helpful as you navigate this. I know you've got a big task ahead of you, and having sat in the Appropriations Committee for the last 5 months, I can tell you where there's money, there's a lot of people who are going to, of course, try to get some of that money to best meet the needs of their communities. So I wish you good luck, and I am here as a partner. So I'd love to answer any questions you might have that I might be able to, if I can't answer them, get you to the people who can.
Great, Becca, thank you. Daniel?
Thanks. Senator, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So the seasonal fuel benefits that folks received last year were increased somewhere between 40 and 200%, depending on their kind of fuel. And that was really helpful for us at Sevca over the winter. I mean, in a way, we didn't hear from as many people as we usually would. So we know that it was really helpful for our clients. Am I right in understanding that they'll be increased again this year?
That is my understanding, but I want to make sure I don't misspeak, Daniel.
Okay.
And so I will, as you can imagine, there are so many details within the budget. And so I would want to go back and get you the correct number. And so may I ask if you could just give me a sense of, were you able to meet the needs of everyone that asked for assistance?
Oh, yes.
Great.
I mean, we do most years anyway, but, you know, usually we would go through a lot more crisis fuel money than we did this year, which, you know, was interesting. And so I think what it kind of showed to us is even a modest increase on everyone's annual seasonal fuel benefit would actually, you know, really help the community and mean that, you know, elderly, disabled, vulnerable Vermonters are not having to traipse into Brattleboro to beg for 125 gallons of fuel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one other question I want to kind of just put out there, you know, so housing is a huge concern for us all in this state, in this town especially. And when people come to the select board with questions around housing, we're often kind of like, there isn't a whole lot that the select board can do, and we kick it onto the state. And so there's a lot of money in there, housing related. You know, knowing what I know about the numbers of folks that we have currently housed in motels, the challenge is less money. You know, we have a lot of money for getting people into properties. It's more that there aren't enough properties. So how can this money be leveraged to actually create more housing stock at all levels?
Yeah, well, and so this is something that keeps me up at night, Daniel, because not just because it takes so long to bring units online, even when you have the money, but those of you who are watching the inflation rate right now, the cost of all of our building supplies have gone up dramatically in the last month. And so the number of units that we thought we might be able to build with this money, you know, each day that goes by, I'm watching the cost of lumber, and it means that we're not going to be able to get as many units online as we thought. And then we have this Hobson's choice. Do we pay now and hopefully, you know, buy it not at the very top, right? Or do we wait it out to see if it comes down and then find out the prices don't come back down? So the folks at VHCB and our local housing partners are going to be making some really difficult choices over the next few months. And it's no surprise to all of us. We have a short window, a building window in terms of the weather. And so I wish that I could be more optimistic. I'm very concerned about the inflation rate right now and what that's going to mean for us. I'm concerned too about, as you said, the capacity that's needed and what we're going to be able to bring online. So I do tend to be an optimist. In this case, you know, being able to look at the incredible investment that we're making in housing is going to make a dent. I don't believe it's going to house everyone in Vermont that we need to house. So that's always heartbreaking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other select board members who have questions for the senator?
Or for Becca. Your Brattleboro buddy down here on South Main Street.
Our neighbor and friend.
Exactly. It's really nice to be home. I took a walk and run with my dog on the retreat trails. And I have to tell you, it was a very odd session. For those of you who don't know, I was one of the only people in the State House every day. It was very odd.
I
So
watched
it's
a
nice
little
to
and
be
I
home.
saw you, the lone person up there, quite a bit. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for all you do. Oh, I see a question
Ian.
from Ian.
Sorry, I had just one quick question, Becca. So as our senator, are you going to help us bring this money to Brattleboro?
Let me understand the question, Ian.
I think as maybe if I take my select board hat off for a second and I just
Yeah.
sit as a resident of Brattleboro, I look at this money and
Yeah.
it's so much, and I just wonder, how are we actually going to access this, and at what level is that gonna, where is it, who's gonna really help us get it? And so, who should people be reaching out to? Who should they be speaking to make their situation understood by their representatives? That's the question that comes to mind. It's not really a select board question. It's just a resident one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways that I can answer that. And so I think that's why it's going to be important for me to send these notes to Liz afterwards. So when you look at specifically, like if we think about Brattleboro and how we've got this incredible dynamic cultural, art scene, and you've got these organizations within Brattleboro that want to take advantage, for example, of the 1.15 million related to the Vermont Council on the Arts. That's the kind of thing that people are going to want to know. How do I get in touch with that particular organization? Because they're the ones that are going to be dealing with that grant, right? And that's true for so many of these other things that are housed within ACCD. And I can tell you what you should know about me is I sit in two committees in addition to being the Senate Pro Tem. And the first morning committee I sit on every single morning is the Economic Development Committee. And I can tell you, we have spent hours and hours in the last 5 months talking about how are we going to get the information out to Vermonters about these programs. And so certainly the folks down at the Brattleboro Development Corporation is going to know a lot about the programs flowing through ACCD related to the micro recovery grants, the economic recovery grants. But there is no one, place right now where you can learn about all of these programs at once. And that's going to be a challenge for all of us. And I don't know if you've thought about, as a town, where you might be able to house some of those links on your town website, if that's even a possibility, if you have the bandwidth to have someone do that. That I see a lot of heads nodding, so that's good.
Part of a bigger conversation, definitely. I'm on the website.
I see. All right, great, got it. And so, but certainly, if you've got someone who is already receiving Reach Up benefits, they're going to find out from their case manager that they're going to be eligible for these other programs, and that's true for some of these other programs. But it's a challenge. I mean, we've never had this influx of cash coming in such a short period of time, and so I think many of us are trying to figure out how do we get word out to those members of the community that can take advantage of these, because we learned from, just a little anecdotally, we learned from the money that we set aside specifically for BIPOC businesses and women-owned businesses for the previous coronavirus relief funds. What we learned was there were organizations that had put the women-owned businesses in touch with each other, and they were able to access those grants much more easily because we didn't have a system around the state that coordinated the BIPOC businesses. So that's true for so many people in need of funds, is that if they're not immediately connected to an organization that is familiar with how to get the grant completed and get it out the door, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And that is concerning to us. So that's been part of throughout this process of how we appropriate these funds. That's been part of the conversation, is how do we make it accessible to people?
Thank you very much.
Daniel?
I have a slight answer to that question as well. So at SEVCA, like one of our jobs is to help people navigate these very like emergent situations where, there's a thing that just got launched the other day. How do I apply? I heard about it. And, so we do that every day. And, and one of the referrals that we make for businesses is BDCC locally. We also have an economic development office as well that helps people with, small business assistance and whatnot. So, and 211 is a good resource too. They're very quick to adjust.
Tim?
Thank you. And thanks so much, Becca, for this. I'll call it an articulate and well-defined starting point, because I have a feeling from the select board hat, putting on that hat, a lot of what I think about right now is when we're talking about assigned municipal funds versus all the other funds, we're going to need, and Peter's going to help us with this, I know, but we're going to need a wall-sized flow chart to kind of figure out when people come to us and say, how about, using some of this money for this, we need to first know what other funds would be a better resource for that purpose. It's super important, because we need to sort of hoard our municipal funds until we know that they're being used well. So it's going to be a careful process on the municipal level, I think, here in Brattleboro.
Yeah, Tim, that's exactly what our struggle has been too. And this dance that we've done with the governor over the last few months is how much of this should be general fund, how much of it should be ARPA. What are those things that we actually could spend infrastructure dollars on that's coming later? So one of the things that we really pushed for, when I say we, I mean as a legislature, to say to the governor, we want to invest more in people programs with some of these dollars, because we anticipate there's going to be infrastructure dollars related to more bricks and mortar later on. And so I think you're right. I think having a flow chart, having buckets, sort of, laid out on the wall, because it gets very confusing very quickly when you're talking about the volume of money you're talking about and the number of programs. And so you want to make sure that if there are funds that you can get out the door at the state level or the federal level first before you're giving up your municipal dollars, that's going to be critical for you. Absolutely.
So we'll be leaning on you a little bit more for that coordination too, I hope. So
absolutely.
Thank you. And
so hopefully we won't always be over Zoom, right? We'll actually maybe be in a room together soon.
That would be great.
Stay tuned for that discussion.
I know. I'm going to have dinner, actually. I'll take you to the mask discussion. I know.
But Becca, I just wanted to thank you and hope that this is the first of many sessions that we'll have to understand your work and lead us to the decision-making that we need to make.
Oh, you're so welcome. And, in my last remarks to the Senate at the end of the session, one of the things I talked about is how grateful we all are to folks who serve on select boards and school boards. It's some of the hardest work that you can do for your community. So thank you. And
thank you.
Good luck with your mask conversation.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Okay. Have a nice dinner.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. Well, that was great. Who wants to convene us as water and sewer commissioners? Oh, Peter, did you want to say anything about the status of our own discussions regarding ARPA funding?
Just very briefly, I can add to what the senator just said, that and the conversation you all had with her. It is going to be important for us to understand how federal and state monies are going to benefit Brattleboro, and how organizations and individuals in Brattleboro can access those programs, so that that helps you decide what are the highest priorities to put the town's money in. We're going to get, we think, still about $3 million. There's also, we need much greater clarity, and we thought that we would have it by now, frankly, not so much on those, very large numbers that are coming from the state and the feds, but as far as our $3 million, we thought that there would be greater clarity by now in any sort of boundaries on what choices the town can make with those funds. That's not at all clear yet. The Department of the Treasury is still writing those rules. We still all anticipate that it's going to be pretty flexible money, but what does pretty flexible mean, and what things are actually out of bounds with that money? And so you have to go into one of the specialized programs to fund. Those things just aren't clear yet. And so we're going to be on a slower pace than what we had anticipated when we were first talking about this 6 or 8 weeks ago. I think that's not a cause for great concern, because we have until the end of 2024 to spend these funds. So there's a good opportunity to do thoughtful, methodical planning on the front end. And what we'll be planning to do is get the best available information, not just about the rules that will apply to our 3 million, but to these other programs that are going to be available from higher levels of government, and bring that forward to you, invite the community in, and work through figuring it out together. But I think that that's likely to be mid to late summer rather than the earlier part of the summer. We thought we might be digging into it substantively right about now. We just don't have the information yet.
Great, and we do need the big picture. And we have a hand up. Kurt Dames, would you like to make a comment?
Hello, hello.
Hi, Kurt.
Hi, everybody. This is Kurt Dimes of Brattleboro, and I work with Brattleboro Common Sense. Our economist, Adam Marchesso, has reviewed the legislation, and it seems clear to him and to me that there are very few strings attached to this money. It specifies that it could be done in the fashion of a regular stimulus relief. And so I think it should be a relief to the select board and to the people that the select board was already overworked, and it is not mandated by the ARPA legislation that the select board should be charged with the distribution of the funds. And also he's produced a couple of analyses which you may wish to review, which show how the money could be distributed in a number of different ways to people in Brattleboro, especially to people below the median income level. There are 3,300 households. 1,900 of them are below the median level. And if the money were distributed to them on an ungraduated scale, they could each be benefited with $2,000, a one-time payment. He could show you that analysis and answer any questions you have. And Brattleboro Common Sense would like to propose additionally that RTM could work out a distribution scheme, or that it could simply be given to all the people, and they could as vouchers, and the people could decide what parts of the items in the town budget should be allocated to with that money. So they could do their own people's budget, or they could take the money as a stimulus fund themselves by one of these analyses. And Adam would be glad to discuss it with you on a one-to-one basis.
Thank you for your comment, Kurt. Okay, yes, Peter?
I've just received a text from Jessica that she's lost internet. So I wanted to let you know that's why she's not in the meeting any longer. And I just saw something blip. I don't know if she's coming back in, but I just wanted to ask if the board wants to proceed and have me just check in with her further, or if you want to take a short break and see if we can get her back into the meeting.
Why don't we take a break? I think that's a great idea. And then we won't necessarily need to take our break at 8.
Oh, okay.
But that has other implications for other participants in the meeting. I didn't
Well,
mean to say that.
You know what? Maybe we can have 2 breaks, but let's take a break now and we'll come back in 10 minutes.
And I'll communicate with Jess and hopefully she'll be back with us in 10 minutes. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So let's reconvene and call ourselves Water and Sewer Commissioners. Do I have a motion to be made?
Yeah. I move to become Water and Sewer Commissioners.
Great. Daniel has asked that we convene as Water and Sewer Commissioners. All select board members. Oh, we don't have Ian. Let's give Ian another minute.
Oh, there
There
he
he
is.
is.
My
All
gosh,
right.
we started right at 10 minutes.
I know. It's a tough world. All in favor of becoming Water and Sewer Commissioners, please raise your hand and say aye.
I missed the motion.
Aye.
Okay, so that's 4, and with Jessica not present at this time. So now that we are Water and Sewer Commissioners, let me ask Peter to speak of the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility improvements.
Sure. I'm going to give a very brief overview. Steve Barrett's in the meeting, and so is Dan Tyler, and so is Chrissy Haskins, and they will have much more detail to share about this important project as it goes forward. The one thing I would like to do in underscoring staff's recommendation for you to award this bid this evening to Kingsbury Companies is there was some information in the references that are in the backup materials, and that's led to some questions regarding particularly an experience in Bennington, where and Chrissy is going to be able to speak to that and other aspects of the review she did, and why in the fullness of her review, she recommends that we move forward. We as staff also, in the fullness of our review, recommend that we move forward and have a high level of confidence that we can proceed and complete this project successfully for the community. You've seen in the materials that the personnel assigned to jobs can sometimes make a very big difference, not just the companies that get the bid. And we think that in the personnel who have been assigned to this job, as well as the personnel whom we will assign to this job on behalf of the town, watching over this project from the town and from Dufresne, that the town's interests will be well protected as we go forward in partnership with Kingsbury and complete this important project for the town. So I wanted to set the table by addressing that straight out, that this is a situation where not every reference came back glowing, and we have a high level of confidence that we should proceed with this project, and you can award the bid with confidence. And having said that, I'm going to ask Steve to pick up the story and take it forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm Steve Barrett, Director of Public Works. I'm going to read my memo to the board, the memo I sent to the board, so the public hears that piece of it. And then Chrissy's going to jump in after, and we're going to, she's going to go and do an overview of the engineering recommendation. And then after that, we'll entertain questions from the board. So I'd like to start out as the subject here is a recommendation to award contract for the water treatment plant upgrade. On May 12th, the Department of Public Works received the following bids for the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility upgrade. Penta Corporation, who's from Moultonboro, New Hampshire, put in a bid for $16,517,000. Kingsbury Company from Middlesex, Vermont, put in a bid for $11,999,500. Both bids included an alternate, and then I'll explain the alternate because it's a little confusing, but it really isn't. The existing water treatment plant has 3 filters. When we construct the new water treatment facility, it will have 4 filters. Our original design called for building the new water treatment facility and putting in a brand new filter, and then removing one of the filters from the existing water treatment plant and moving it over to the new water treatment plant. Okay, and then once the new water treatment was up and running with 2 filters, then the old water treatment plant would be decommissioned and the remaining 2 filters be brought over into the new facility. This alternative, we think is well worthwhile to purchase a new filter. Originally, when we looked at this, it just didn't seem to be cost effective. But we see a big advantage to building a water treatment plant and having 2 brand new filters, and then getting that new water treatment facility up and operating with 2 brand new filters, leave the existing facility the way it is. And then once we're confident that the new water treatment plant is up and running with the 2 brand new filters and all new components, then we would decommission the old water treatment plant and we would bring in 2 more filters, recondition them, which is going to take time. And then we would dispose of the 3rd filter. Okay, so that's the reason that we think this alternate is worthwhile. And I fully support that from an operator standpoint of we're going to have our existing water treatment plant up and running with full confidence there. And then this new treatment plant, you know, there's going to be some bugs in it. And we're going to have to get that up and running. And then when we make this switch over, we have to have a high level of confidence that that will supply that potable water to town. So our engineer, Chrissy Haskins from the Dufresne Group, reviewed all these bids, and she's been in constant communication with the state and then her fellow engineers. It's not just Chrissy, she has a whole team here that reviewed all these documents. And so she's recommending that we accept the low bid from Kingsbury for $11,999,500. So the Department of Public Works staff has also reviewed the recommendation and we concur with Dufresne. And so now I'd like to turn it over to Chrissy so she can give you some of the background work that she did to make this recommendation. Chrissy?
Thanks, Steve. So when we review the bids, we go through a few different things. The first one is we go through and just check the math, make sure everything works out. In this case, there weren't very many bid items, so that was pretty easy. There were no math errors in it. We also review the bids for to ensure that they're complete bids. Everything's filled out properly. They're signed. They included all of the attachments that they were supposed to include. In this case, there was a federal form that needed to be submitted for the funding and a bid bond. So we make sure everything is included in the bid and it is a valid, responsive bid. So in this case, both bids were both responsive. And then the next thing we do is we, the low bidder sends us their qualifications, which includes a list of past projects, current projects, and some references. And out of all of that, we contacted 3 of their both references and past projects. Well, we actually contacted 4 of them, and we only had responses from 2. And so we utilized our own experience with Kingsbury as a 3rd reference because we have done several projects with them up in the St. Johnsbury area. And then we also contact the bond agent for Kingsbury to make sure that they haven't defaulted on any any previous bonds, and there hasn't been any issues with their bonding. And we also confirm that the bonding agent and the insurance company will be providing the performance and payment bonds for the project. So in this case, the bonding agent had no issues working with them, and they will be providing performance and payment bonds. And then I'll jump back to the responses we got from their references. So the one Peter alluded to earlier was from an engineer that worked on the Bennington wastewater treatment facility project, which I believe was completed last year. In this case, the engineer was not happy with the performance. I'll actually just read to you what I wrote in the recommendation letter. Jason worked with Kingsbury on the Bennington wastewater treatment facility project in 2020. Jason noted that both the project manager and project superintendent were inexperienced and that the superintendent was removed from the project upon the engineer's request. The quality of work was inconsistent and some work had to be redone. Kingsbury initiated some change orders on the project, and Jason noted pricing was not usually fair to the owner. Kingsbury did not meet the specified schedule as a result of inadequate staffing and an inexperienced crew. Jason does not recommend Kingsbury. The next reference we got was from another engineer that worked on a pump station project in Whitefield, New Hampshire in 2020. That one was, Mike stated Kingsbury provided competent and qualified staff and their quality of work was satisfactory. Kingsbury was fair on change orders and completed the project on schedule. Mike recommends Kingsbury, noting they do a great job. So those are two very different references. And as I noted, we didn't receive any responses from the other two folks that we contacted. So Randy Goodwin, who is our construction services manager for Dufresne Group, worked on several projects with Kingsbury between 2010 and 2019 up in St. Johnsbury. And so what he had to say was the proposed superintendent for the Brattleboro project, John Osowski, was involved as a superintendent in one of the projects in St. Johnsbury. All of the projects there were completed successfully, with only one project exceeding the specified schedule due to material procurement delays. Some of the projects had change orders. Pricing was negotiated with Kingsbury and fair prices agreed upon by all parties. Mr. Osowski was competent and attentive to detail. Now, the reason I noted specifically about that one superintendent is that he will be he is the proposed superintendent for Kingsbury for the Brattleboro treatment plant project. So with all of that and the fact that they will be, the insurance company will be providing performance and payment bonds, we didn't find any reason to not recommend award. I don't know if Steve wants to add anything to that, but that's pretty much our evaluation of it.
No, I think that does a good job, Chrissy. And this also ties into funding. You know, we are looking at revolving loan funds. And so if these companies, or if they're low bid and they meet the qualifications and standards, we're also limited on who we can choose.
Steve, I have a question. Do either of you, do you or Chrissy know who the project manager is? And they've stated who the project manager is. Does anyone have a reference about him in particular?
That's what Chrissy just spoke to about the John Osowski.
I thought she said he was project superintendent.
Yeah,
Are there two positions, or is it just the one?
I think that's a terminology, Chrissy.
The project superintendent will be in control of the entire job, and will generally be on site, kind of managing the job on site. The project manager, some companies it's the same person. In other companies, a project manager could be the person in the office managing the paperwork side of things. We do not have any additional information at this point from Kingsbury, other than the one person that I noted.
And if they were to change that person, how would that? Is there any recourse on our end if they were to change personnel?
The contract or the bid documents do require that there is a single person in charge of the project throughout the entire duration of the project, and that person does need to be full-time on the project.
Okay. Other comments from other select board members? Ian?
Oh, thank you both very much. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if it should go to Chrissy or Steve. Given that there aren't that many bid items and both bids were complete. What explains the large difference between the two bid prices?
Want me to take that one, Steve?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've talked about it pretty in depth, but you can provide more information than I can.
So the difference in bid prices often comes down to the proximity of a contractor to a project, the amount of work a specific contractor has in comparison to the other bidders, and their sequence of work or the way they're going to approach the project. And so in this case, Kingsbury is closer than Penta. Penta is located in, most of their staff is located in Maine. And Penta needs to hire more subcontractors. They don't actually have their own excavation crew. So they have to subcontract all of that out, whereas Kingsbury does have their own excavation crew. So less subcontractor costs, less markup on subcontractors with Kingsbury. And then I'm not sure what the workload of Penta is, but they might have had some other work that they didn't need this one as much.
Okay, great, thank you.
Are there other select board members who have comments or questions? Tim?
Yeah, I'll just say that you know, it's never great when you hear a couple of comments about past bad experiences, but given the work that staff and Chrissy has done in vetting this, I have confidence that this will go well, especially under their watchful eye, Steve and Chrissy. And you don't, you know, in the real world, you sometimes have people that are less than stellar under the same, you know, within a company. So I do feel better if, you know, if we can have that one Mr. Osowski associated with the project. So it seems like it's a reasonable thing. And this same company did help us with wastewater treatment, correct?
Yeah, after the tropical storm Irene, they rebuilt the outfall pipe that went out into the Connecticut River. It was several years after that. They rebuilt that and they did an excellent job on that project.
Good. Yeah. So thank you for the work.
Daniel?
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, I mean, really just kind of wanted to sort of build on what Tim was saying. I trust the judgment, experience, and professionalism of both Steve and Chrissy. And they know a heck of a lot more about this kind of thing than we do. Having reviewed the documents, I mean, yeah, that reference is rough. It's rough to read. And, you know, this is a major project for the town. The representative town meeting, you know, recently approved the bond, and everybody is hoping that this goes well. And I trust with all of our experience and, you know, knowledge and skill, this will go well. So let it be so.
I think Steve and Chrissy are aware up front of what may come, and will make sure that everything runs smoothly. So I'm confident in the awarding of the bid. Anyone else have any more comments before we hear from this member of the public? Okay, Fire Tablet, please join the conversation and tell us your name and where you're located. Oh, it's Dick DeGray, everybody.
There you go. Question for Steve. Sitting here, thinking about the contractor. When we did the line up on Black Mountain Road where we had the disaster, who was the contractor on that?
That was Kingsbury.
That's what I thought. And I think the board should be made aware of that, because that was quite a fiasco for the people in the merchants in Black Mountain Square that never got anything out of that. And I think it was a real black eye. So I do have a concern about the fact that we're going to pick them for this project. And if I were sitting on the board with only 2 bidders and knowing what I know about what they did on Black Mountain Road, I would be going out for a rebid.
So one of the things with the Black Mountain Gravity sewer, in the end, we ended up with a sewer line that works for the town. We also eliminated a pump station that would have cost every 20 years in excess of $1 million. So, one of the things with these contracts, you can't always, pick exactly what you want. There was a situation there where the insurance companies were brought in, that there was an overflow from a storm that went into the forced main and it flooded businesses. And so at that point, it really became an insurance issue versus the town with the contractor. So in the end, we ended up with a situation where we had the contract was fulfilled for what our needs were and what we required. And so there wasn't really any recourse. And then, of course, we thought about that when this contractor bid on this project. But then in order to obtain the funding and the cost of the project, it fits within our funding. We're limited on saying, geez, we just don't want this contractor. So with that, after really looking at this hard with the engineering team that we have and myself from my experience, we're recommending that Kingsbury be selected for this project.
Peter?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to add on to what Steve has said. Everything there is accurate. In addition to that, there was a extended dispute between the town and Kingsbury about that project related to a separate aspect of it, not the incident that related to the flooding and the insurance companies resolving that, but actually in our communication with the contractor and some issues that the contractor ran into on the job and some delays. And in the final resolution of that, there was a settlement where the town paid a substantial amount of additional funds, but it was roughly equivalent to the amount of the change order that Kingsbury had requested in the prior summer. So we had a situation where we were concerned about how that job evolved. And in the end, when we, including with information from an expert that the town had hired as part of that dispute to help us resolve the matter of who owed what to whom, it was determined, including by the town in a final resolution of that with Kingsbury, that the additional amount owed by the town to sort of bring that matter to closure was the amount that was approximately equal to what Kingsbury had requested in change order the previous summer. So it's important to note, yes, that was a difficult situation for all of us who were involved in it, but it's not an indication of Kingsbury being unacceptable for this work. And for the reasons that Chrissy has indicated and Steve has indicated and I've described, we actually think they do qualify for award. We think they have submitted an awardable bid within our funding for the project. They meet the state's requirements and the state is providing the lion's share of the funding for this project. And so we think it's appropriate that you award the bid. I would say as response to the legitimate concerns that people might have based on the Bennington reference and based on our own experience at that one project on Black Mountain Road, that we intend to staff this project in a way that is full partnership with Mr. Osowski of Kingsbury. This is not a situation where we're going to trust that things are going to be done great and we're going to check in on it from time to time. We'll have full-time town staff there, along with Mr. Osowski being there full-time. And there'll be significant attention paid. Chrissy can speak to the level of staffing that Dufresne plans, and I'm sure that if it becomes necessary, Dufresne would step that up for us as well. So we're confident that this project can be completed successfully. We would like, of course, to start out not having this cloud of concern over it, but we believe that with the particular person who's being assigned to lead it for Kingsbury and the way in which we are going to staff it ourselves, and all the other matters, aspects of this that have been discussed tonight, we believe that it is a bid that the select board should award.
Okay, thank you very much. To one and all, are we ready for a motion? Okay, one of you head nodders want to make a motion?
Yes, I can make a motion.
Great.
I move to award the bid for construction of the new Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility to Kingsbury Companies of Middlesex, Vermont at a cost of $11,999,500.
All right, wonderful. Ian has made a motion to award the bid for construction of the new Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility to Kingsbury Companies of Middlesex, Vermont at a cost of $11,999,500. All select board members in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion has passed 5-0, so it's carried, and I thank you all for your input. All right. I take a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
So moved.
Great. All in favor of adjourning as Water and Sewer Commissioners, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Great. Let's move on to new business. We've already heard from Becca Balint. So, well, here's the thing. We're going to have probably a very lengthy discussion about COVID-19 matters. And, we usually take a break at 8:00. Tim, you expressed a need to have that surety of a break about this time. Is this a good time?
Oh, you don't have to do it on my account. But if I were to choose, I think we should probably dive in a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, don't leave it up to me. That's not fair. It's just around 8. I get to say goodnight. Jessica knows what that's like.
Right. I'm just saying.
But it could be 8.
If you could say goodnight now, then we could jump into COVID-19 and everyone could say goodnight to whomever they need to say goodnight to, and then we can begin our discussion.
Good night, Daniel.
Good night, Ian.
Thanks, Daniel.
No arguments. I just didn't want to be the one to decide.
All right.
So,
Let's take a break now and convene at 8 and begin our meaty discussion. We're reconvening and we are discussing new business item B, which is COVID-19 matters for discussion. Let me just start things off by saying that for those of you who think that select board meetings are kabuki theater, I'd just like to say, I have no idea how this discussion will end up. And we're going to have a good, robust discussion. We've heard from many quarters and have had many divergent views. What we'll do tonight is have this robust discussion after we review the scientific and health data. And throughout this discussion, I think we just need to understand that while there are many vaccinated people, there are also certain people who remain at risk. And I would put those into 3 groups: children, people with compromised immune systems, and other non-vaccinated people. And before I just start this discussion off with anyone who'd like to comment, I will say that this mask ordinance was initially enacted to help retailers in Brattleboro. Oh, and before I open up the discussion, let's hear from Peter about the data that we've asked staff to collect.
Sure. So you asked for Brattleboro data that was specific to the numbers in Brattleboro, and I'll say that that's a little bit hard. There is data that is compiled by the health department, town by town. They ask that be used in a not overly precise manner because it's gathered in a not overly precise manner. So they're very confident of the statewide numbers. They're also very confident of countywide numbers when they're aggregating information for parts of the state. One of the complications for a place like Brattleboro, where there's a lot of people who are here who, at different times of the week, particularly weekdays, but at other times as well, who are not residents of Brattleboro, is that, as we well know, they obtain a lot of services here, including getting vaccinated or going to the doctor and so on. So it is not possible to be overly precise about the numbers in Brattleboro as related to Brattleboro's population. But yet there is some data available, and I've reported them to you in the second paragraph of my memorandum to the board, dated May 27th. And the most significant one there is the decline in new positive tests, new cases of the virus. The way the health department tracks that is on 2-week rolling averages, so as to be able to account for an individual incident that might be a spike on a particular day, for instance, not to let that skew the data over time. And so they do 2-week rolling averages have been doing that throughout the pandemic. And the numbers are very encouraging for Brattleboro. During the course of May, the 2-week rolling average, which is issued on a weekly basis, went from 17 to 10 to 4 to 3. So the new incidences of the virus being diagnosed in Brattleboro have gone down substantially during the month of May. The vaccination rate is harder to get a handle on, but is estimated to be similar to the statewide rate, which is in the upper 70% area of people having had at least one shot, and in the 60% plus area of people who are fully vaccinated.
All right, who would like to begin? Daniel.
Thanks. I guess I just want to say, for all who are watching who are not intimately aware of our agenda, we are going to discuss specifically the order that we put into place last May about wearing face coverings, aka masks, and that so a year ago-ish, we had a meeting, and on the agenda at that time was COVID matters. And as has been the way of things during the pandemic, on Friday afternoons, things get announced and they sometimes catch us off guard. And because of how our agendas are put together in the schedule, that May last year, we learned that municipalities would be able to enact things that were different or stronger, really, than the state's guidance on masks at the time. At the time, the state did not have what's commonly called now a mask mandate, but it did allow municipalities to enact orders that were stronger than that. And we had a meeting where during COVID matters, I raised that, even though it wasn't warned as exactly about that, which was difficult for us at the time, but Burlington the previous night had just passed an order. And so there was a precedent of like some language and, A lot of people that weekend in the town were talking. And I say all this to set the scene because we're kind of in a similar situation here where on May 14th, the CDC's guidance on mask wearing changed. It was a Friday, and the state quickly changed its guidance on mask wearing to match the CDC's. So since May 14th, our mask order has been, I mean, you could sort of describe it as in conflict, but it doesn't match what the state's current guidance is and what the CDC's current guidance is on mask usage. And so there have been some in the community that have felt that Brattleboro has been like dragging its feet and intentionally not following CDC guidance. And most people in the community are not aware of like why that is the case. You know, it is only being talked about in this meeting because this is the first time we could warn it and actually have a discussion that resulted in us taking some action. And so I would really like us to be aligned with the CDC and the state's guidance on mask wearing. And I think it's really important to recognize that that guidance is pretty simply unvaccinated people, unvaccinated people should continue to wear masks. Those who are fully vaccinated, i.e. 2 weeks after their last dose in a 2-dose or 2 weeks after 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson shot, may choose to relinquish their mask in most settings, not all, healthcare settings, public transportation, and maybe one other that I'm forgetting. And so I feel that it's important at this time, given the way that the vaccination campaign has gone in the state, is going in the state, is going in our county. I looked at the rates today in Windham County and we're about 70%, where 70% of the residents of Windham County who are eligible for a vaccine have had 1 dose at least. And so for me, I just wanted to kind of kick things off by giving a bit of that context and saying quite simply that I think that we should align our current policy with the CDC and the state. The disconnect between those two policies right now is causing confusion for people, and that confusion then tends to lead to some kind of conflict. Usually that's taking place between an employer and employee, or between somebody that's going into a place to either purchase something or receive some kind of services. And as Liz kind of mentioned, way back when we did put this order in place, and I'm really proud of us that we did, we were ahead of the curve on that. We did so to kind of, to be the bad guy for everybody. So people could say, well, the town requires it. And right now we're kind of the bad guy in another way where people, you know, people who have stores or people who are employers or people who work in various places that, you know, provide services are in situations where they're in conflict because of our mask order. And I think that given where we stand in terms of vaccination progress, in terms of case trajectory, in terms of the fact that the vaccine is a powerful tool in this pandemic, and really, you know, is the reason why we are anywhere close to being out of it. And I really do hope that we will be out of it very soon, as long as enough people get vaccinated. So I really think that we ought to align our guidance with the states, you know, just fall back to the state's guidance, which is the CDC guidance. And so that's my position. I have many more things to say on it later, but I just wanted to get that up there.
Great. Thank you for starting us off, Daniel. Who would like to speak next? Ian.
I can, yeah. I'm in agreement with Daniel. I think I support ending the mask mandate, falling in line with the governor's order and with the CDC guidelines. I think at the end of the day, I really want to acknowledge why I appreciate how emotional and difficult of a discussion this is. You know, we worked so hard to build masking as an important public health decision that each individual needed to make to get this community and the state and this country through this pandemic, and we're not done. But I think at the end of the day, we need to put our trust in the vaccine, in the science, and I think we need to be in alignment with the levels above us to avoid the confusion that Daniel referenced. And I think the other part of it is with the other two items on the agenda revolving around COVID and the municipality may provide for some opportunities for some stepped progress towards normalcy. And I am excited to have those conversations tonight or whenever we do. This is has less of an opportunity for that. And I've heard that from community members that it's how quickly these changes have happened is really difficult. And I can really understand that. And I wish there was, I don't see a way to have this be stepped. I think that we need to make a decision and decide whether to have this mandate or not. That's the most effective way and the most clear way that we can provide guidance to everyone in the town about this. So at the end of the day, yeah, I agree. I'm in support of ending the mandate and relinquishing that responsibility to individual business owners who may continue to choose to have a mask requirement for their business.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, Jessica.
So I also agree that the guidelines set forward by the state are on with the idea that folks who are unvaccinated should absolutely keep masking in indoor situations, in businesses that provide service or goods. So what I did was I walked around downtown this weekend and I talked to several folks. We'd gotten some emails as select board members from business owners who were saying, it takes up my employees' time to have this fight. It's stressful. It's not great. So I was really curious what those frontline employees were experiencing and what they were thinking and feeling about this mask mandate, especially this weekend, which saw a lot of tourist traffic, which is wonderful for our downtown businesses. But it was a great moment to bring up this topic with those folks, lots of teenagers standing behind these counters in our downtown businesses. And I emphasize teenagers because I want you to understand that teenagers have not had the chance to become fully vaccinated yet. And many of them have only had the chance to get one shot. And looking at our Windham County numbers specifically for that age demographic, it's behind even other counties in our state. So I just want to put that out there on the table. Businesses say they're having a hard time hiring folks. If we do away with the mask mandate, what I heard from these folks was that they would feel like they would be more in danger doing their jobs in these businesses that welcome people from lots of different communities, not just Vermont, with a great vaccination rate ahead of many other states, but interacting with folks from New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and other states across the country. I heard a family from Oklahoma was visiting town as well. And business owners and employees were telling me that when they asked folks to please put a mask on, people understood, people were compliant, people were friendly about it and didn't take offense. That was entirely the experience of everyone I talked to, that folks were absolutely willing to still put on their masks. I'm wondering who we're serving if we do away with this mask mandate. It's not the kids who are unvaccinated. It's not the immunocompromised people who still feel like they can't leave their houses. It's people that just don't want to wear a mask. And I cannot conscionably go along with that, because I've watched my daughter this entire school year wear a mask for 6 hours a day. And if we can't continue to ask folks to put a mask on for the 10, 20 minutes while they're in a store, at least until both our community, our teenagers, and the corridor communities around Brattleboro have hit that 80% vaccination rate, I don't think that it's fair to the kids who have been making the sacrifices to keep the rest of us healthy. And I don't think that it's fair for us to do away with the mask mandate yet. Brattleboro always marches to its own drummer. And I think that we should demonstrate that we care about our community, we care about our kids, and that we should view this through an equity lens like we committed to do, and keep the mask mandate at least till the end of the summer. Thank you.
All right.
Going down the line. Do you want me to go next, or would you like to not be the last word, Liz?
I'll be happy to be the last word. You go ahead,
Okay.
Tim.
It always, when I was chair, it sometimes bugged me that it felt like I was expected to go last.
Well, actually, what happens is it just bugs me that I can't go first. So there you go.
Well, once in a while, you should have that.
Yeah.
I have so many thoughts that I'll just try to narrow it down a little bit. First thing I wanted to say is that we've spent a whole year being so careful, a whole year sacrificing a lot. I mean, depending on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, can guide that quite a bit. But I think it's very easy to give in to a fear that was warranted for many, many months by all of the data that I have seen, and to hold on to the fear a little bit too long. Meanwhile, the data is telling us something totally different. Now, I went today because I actually worked down in New Jersey for 2 days, Sunday and Monday. So I worked this morning and today really looking into things and really trying to do my select board homework in one day versus doing it over the weekend. And it's a very different world down there. And in New Jersey, if you don't know, got hit very hard by coronavirus, very hard, not like Vermont. And they are serious about masking down in New Jersey. But the governor lifted the order 2 days before we got there. And I watched people navigate it pretty well. They walked into businesses with it on and then took it off immediately. And my hotel, for some reason, was still requiring them, even though the order was they didn't have to. But everybody abided by the sign that was on the front of the hotel. And nobody was really, especially in elevators, people would just throw them on. So getting back to sort of the disconnect that I'm seeing here when I return back to Brattleboro between a fear, which was very real, not lining up to data. The purpose of our mandate, and I do want to give credit to Daniel because I watched, and part of my homework this morning was to watch that meeting, May 19th, I believe it was, 2020. And Daniel came out and proposed a policy on masks. And that was ahead of a lot of people. He kicked off the discussion. And we need to understand that everything has kind of flipped. The purpose was to flatten a curve. Vermont never really got the curve. If you recall, the flattening the curve was to flatten the the inundation of patients and ICU beds in hospitals. Certainly it's been more than flattened. There's literally no curve in that respect anymore, in Vermont especially. And back then we were being responsive to our merchants who really wanted some town backup to what they wanted to do, most of them. And now we have the reverse situation there. We have more merchants than not look to be in favor. And the one that are in favor of lifting the ordinance mandate. No, I'm sorry, it's not even mandate, it's order, because mandate became the word, but ours is technically an order. It's not an ordinance either. So the difference, what happened was, if people understand exponential increase in both cases and deaths went up, was very scary. And we're reacting to that on a continuing basis. But if you go and look at that CDC data that I shared it on my social media, it has dropped exponentially, just like it went up exponentially. And it's an amazing drop. And it, from a fear-based perspective, it can feel like, untrue, but if we say we're following the science to put the mask order in place, we have to also recognize the science that tells us when it's time to let it go, at least from a municipal perspective, I think. Because the argument that we should wait due to not everyone having been vaccinated would be powerful to me, because there are younger people who just got their second shot or just haven't been able to get it together to get everything in, and there's a 2-week wait. That would work for me if there was evidence that there was clear and present danger right now. If all vaccinations stopped, if there was danger. There is no longer any evidence that I can see of that. Don't get me wrong, I'm saying that everyone should get their shot, because that's how we got to this place. And it should continue to happen. And I'm pretty sure it is the way to get out, because if you're vaccinated and you feel freer to be hugging people and taking off your mask and walking into a restaurant, that shows everybody, the end game. So I'm in favor of lifting it. I think there is no danger in lifting it immediately. And I want to reassure everybody that merchants that want to keep the order, you have full town support. Individuals that want to keep your mask on, you have my support, and I think you'll have town support. Why wouldn't you? And just remind everybody that the governor has not even lifted all the restrictions. And so when we lift ours, it will fall back into Vermont's very cautious, science-driven methodology that Governor Scott has been following. So that's all I wanted to say right now.
Okay. Well, from what I've heard, I think the interesting parts are that, we're still in a state of emergency and there are vulnerable people. But I think both Ian and Jess said that that there was no problem in when people asked people to put their masks on, they did so, and it was not an issue. And so that can certainly continue if we were to lift this order. And I think what we owe it to, the community that, that we acted on behalf a year ago. We acted to help the retail community. And now I think the best way we can act to help the retail community is to rescind the order, allowing people to wear masks if they choose, and allowing us to come back and strike up the order again if there's some sort of threat in the community that we believe requires our action. But generally speaking, I think it would signal to the community that Brattleboro is open, and and also I think what needs to be said is that the more that we can encourage people who can be vaccinated to get vaccinated, the sooner that we reach this herd immunity, and the sooner we will protect those who cannot be vaccinated. And I don't know how we send that signal, but it needs to be said. But I bet you there's more people who want to say more things. So, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the clearest message, that vaccination is our path out of this pandemic. You know, maybe this has started to feel very normal, right? We're sitting here in our little rooms on these screens, but a little, well, maybe 14, 15 months ago, we weren't really working on this. We had other business to attend to, and we have become, used to this way of working. The mask is a tool that people use for public health, and it's been a wonderful tool for us. It is not the only tool. The mask is not our way out of the pandemic. If we didn't have the vaccine and we just had the mask, not a whole lot changes. I don't imagine that Brattleboro's mask order at this point is what drives people's behavior. I think what drives people's behavior is it's more about community. It's more about culture. It's more about practice, So perhaps one of the reasons why Vermont has been spared some of the ravages that other states have endured is in part because of our willingness to sacrifice, for some small levels of comfort for one another. Wearing a mask for the vast majority of people is not a hardship. It is not a tyranny. It is showing that you care for one another. And at this point, people will continue to do what they feel comfortable. I was really lucky to get vaccinated pretty early. I didn't feel any level of comfort with my vaccination status until probably about a month ago, So everybody is going to come out of this sort of hopefully tail end of the pandemic with different levels of comfort. And I can understand the anxiety around this mask order. And I do appreciate Jess's points around folks that have not been able to get vaccinated. But part of what's happening here is enough people are vaccinated that we are seeing massive drops in cases, and we're seeing big drops in hospitalization and deaths, and that is the goal here. So I don't believe that us rescinding this order will flick a switch and all of a sudden everybody will rush down to Hannaford's, tear their masks off and cause chaos. I think people will do what they are comfortable with, and I trust that the vast majority of people in our community still want to really take care of each other.
Thank you, Daniel. Jessica?
I just wanted to share a story of when I was walking around. I ran into two people. They worked at two different stores. One was a teenager who hadn't been fully vaccinated, and one was a guy who was immunocompromised for his reasons. And both of them told me a little bit about their employers and their take on masking. Neither employer wanted masks. Both welcomed unmasked people into the business. Both businesses received a lot of tourists coming through. In fact, when I was there, somebody with Connecticut plates pulled right up to the door and came in. So until I don't understand. Like, this may be good for business and it may be good for employers, but these employees on the front line who aren't there yet with the vaccinations or who are still vulnerable, if we could just hold on a few more months, I don't see what is such a difficulty with that. Particularly comparing us to, say, another town in Vermont, like Brookline. I mean, they're not seeing the traffic that we are. They're not seeing the tourism that we are. And it absolutely makes sense for a town like that to do away with any sort of mask mandate or requirement, because I'm sure their population will be able to access vaccines and won't experience a lot of new inputs into the community. Brattleboro is different. And I think we need to acknowledge that. Being on Route 9, being on 91, it's a great place. It's a great place for tourists. And it's those frontline workers that are the face of Brattleboro. And I think we should really respect their experience and their needs and maintain the mask order, at least for a little longer.
Daniel?
I just want to respond to this idea that outside of the borders of Vermont, it's like some sort of chaos and nobody is taking any precautions or, you know, following the science or caring to get vaccinated. You know, the states that we border, Massachusetts, 76% of their population over the age of 12 has had one dose. New Hampshire, that we often lampoon as, you know, I don't know, whatever. Let's not even get into that. 68% of their population over the age of 12 has had one dose. New York State, which, you know, obviously is a massive state with varying different kind of characteristics, 64.8. Connecticut, 76.1. So I don't think we're talking about states around us not taking this seriously. I believe that actually people that come here from those states are coming here responsibly. You know, back at, you know, 6 months ago, we were thinking about the influx of potential viral transmission from folks coming from away. And we didn't necessarily see it. You know, if you listen to those press conferences a couple of times every week, what we actually heard was that the transmission in Vermont was largely from Vermont. And so I think that given that other states around us, particularly our nearest neighbors, have taken this vaccination campaign equally seriously, I just don't see that there's some big threat that we're not taking responsibility for outside our borders.
You know what? I think a lot of the spike occurred from the holidays. You know, a lot of people got together regardless of, you know, masks, social distancing. You know, no one was really vaccinated at that point, and the numbers surged. And now I just think with such low numbers that we have, I think it's just hard to justify. I understand that there are people who cannot get vaccinated and that they will need to protect themselves. But I think there's other things in place to protect themselves. And I'm sure that the stores will, you know, allow people to continue to wear masks as necessary. Anyone else want to weigh in again?
Sorry, just very quickly. I just wanted to point out that, you know, this, for me, a lot of this gets back to the role of municipal government and the role of government in general. We have situations in our daily lives that have risk, but we don't feel that it is appropriate for the town of Brattleboro, for instance, to mandate that a parent holds the child's hand as they cross the street, because we trust that that parent will do that right thing, because that keeps a child safe. I think there's a very real lesson that we've learned throughout this thing, and I try to find the bright side of every situation. So the mask thing, we've learned, because when's the last time you got a cold? I mean, colds have gone way down because people are wearing masks. People are sanitizing their hands. People are conscious when they're sick. Maybe they should wear a mask. I'm hoping that that lesson will live for a lot longer through our society. But are we willing to mandate that someone who has the flu or thinks they might have just been exposed to the flu has to wear a mask. Well, I'm not sure that we have, permission from our constituents to step into people's lives in that way. And so when this risk has dropped to, it is now literally much lower than the flu, the risk of dying or terrible effects from the flu. Would we be willing to apply a mask order to someone who has the flu? It's just a philosophical question, but it makes you think about the intersection of personal responsibility and keeping people reasonably safe, because there's no such thing as safe. There's just harm reduction, risk reduction that we can do. So just want to throw that out there because, as I've said before, I speak conservative. And so conservatives might say that it's too much nanny state. It's too much, in my business. And you got to trust. Our last meeting, I was asked to trust my fellow board members when it came to the question of, billing everybody, billing for childcare. And I took that to heart. And I want to ask everybody to trust our community and trust our merchants and trust our visitors, because look at the colors around the entire New England Eastern Seaboard is doing very well on vaccination. So there's a lot of trust in science going on. And I just feel like we can now ramp down as quickly as we ramped up. I think it's the responsible thing to do. Thanks.
All right, let's hold our thoughts and hear from the public. Gary?
Hey, everybody, how you doing? I don't want to take that up to that next level, Tim, that trust, but I want to put faith in everyone in it, doing the right thing that they're supposed to do. Trust is good, but having faith in your community and people coming in here that they're doing what's right, following whatever rules or guidelines that are put in place. I was all happy and gung ho once I got my shots, and I had to also keep in mind not to get complacent. Complacency could be also an enemy along with COVID. COVID could be this hiding or rearing its home, because there's a thing, the red light, yellow light, green light. I just think we're in the yellow zone right now, personally myself. Even though I got my shots and I go to the hospital because I have surgery coming up. So the first question I ask, are your people inoculated? I'm going into surgery. So we still have that ability of preservation to ask these questions to people. I mean, without insulting in a way, but just for your own safety and the safety of others. So I think learning this too, and also what Daniel was saying, is at some point we got to come out of the cave. We can't stay hidden in here from that invisible enemy. And we're going to have faith and trust that people will do the right thing. And we already know that everyone's going to be inoculated. Like Jessica said, I did my little research and my little reporting, asking people who got inoculated and why not. A lot of people say they don't believe in the science. People are not ready. They need more facts. So some people said that they're just going to do it. So you have to use a lot of common sense and wisdom when it comes to this, when you're walking that line and making that right choice and decision upon opening up Brattleboro, knowing that you're going to have people that either did get it, or somewhere in between. So that being said, just you have to be cautious. Don't get complacent. Ask questions wherever you may be going into. Is mask mandated? And I still wear my mask regardless. It's just incorporated, become a second nature to wear it even regardless. Because I've walked down the street on Brattleboro and there's still people wearing masks and they go, ooh, but I whip out my car. Look, I got my shot. I'm good. But there's that fear factor still. So I think it's going to take a while. It took a while to get to where we're at. It's going to take a while to get people to have that, not just trust, but faith that everyone's where they need to be. And I think that's something we just got to take in consideration and just hope and pray that that time comes. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in person myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Sure.
Megan Barrows? Hi,
Can you
Megan.
hear me? Sorry,
Yes.
I'm new to this Zoom thing.
Yes, thank you.
I agree with many points made by everybody on the board. I want things to open up. I want things to go back to normal. But as a mother, I agree with Jessica. Our kids have made huge sacrifices doing remote learning and the masks. Over the summer, they're going to be getting together more often, whether they're vaccinated or not. And that's putting them at a huge risk for COVID spiking and not being able to go back to school full time in the fall. And the kids need the socialization. I don't want to see the cases spike again and the kids not be able to go to school in the fall because we are allowing everybody not to wear masks and that chance to happen. My other aspect is I'm a local business owner. I cut hair. So I'm touching people's heads and touching people's faces. And I myself am immune compromised. I haven't been able to get my vaccines yet. I'm open to getting them and wanting to get them, but it's another month or so before my doctor said I can. So it's hard for me. Like, I'm willing to wear a mask, but to force other people to wear a mask is hard without the town ordinance because people don't want to, I don't know, people aren't being completely honest either. Some people are showing the vaccine card and then other people are just saying, yes, I have it, but I don't have to show you my card. So how do we really know that they're vaccinated or not? It's just challenging because then I have a coworker that she's fully vaccinated, which is wonderful. But then she's telling people, if you want to come in unmasked, come in on the days where Megan's not there. So then you're having to put the business that you can come in these days if you want to wear a mask, these days if you don't want to wear a mask. And then I have a client who has a family member that's been fully vaccinated and has COVID right now. Yeah, there's a little bit of fear to it, but I just think that, like Gary had just said, I think we're in the yellow zone of the red, yellow, and green. And I think if we just wait a little bit longer, it'll be that much safer to go green and give it the full all. I think this summer is going to be a lot like the holidays. I think there's going to be a chance that things could spike because people are going to be getting together more. And I mean, I encourage people to get together. We all need to socialize, but if you're outside and away from each other, that's fine without a mask. But for me, I have to be inches from people, not even 3 or 6 feet from people, whether they've been vaccinated or not. So as a business owner, I think it would help us out a lot if you could continue it just a couple months longer, because the state just opened it up to 12-year-olds getting the vaccine. So that's their first one. You have to wait another month before they can get their second one, plus 2 weeks. So I think we should be giving them the chance also. And it's not just my business. There's been veterinarians in town that said the same thing. They have to get very close to people who are holding their pets and they have no option. I mean, I think by telling people, if you feel comfortable wearing a mask for your own health concerns or for fear, go ahead. But some of us, we don't have a choice. Like, we have to be in people's faces. I can't just quit my job. I'm a business owner. My business will go under. So I just don't see the harm in keeping it a couple months longer. I don't think people are that against it in town that they're going to be opposed to not going to shop in Brattleboro because they have to wear a mask to go in a store for 10, 15 minutes or even 20 minutes to get their hair cut. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Megan. Robin, do you have a comment?
Hi, yeah, thanks. I understand that the town wants to make a science-based decision. And I do think that, sometimes we can get so caught by just numbers that we're not really thinking about the actual humans that represents. So if we say that around 75 or whatever it was % of our town is vaccinated, that means 1 out of every 4 people is unvaccinated. And Elizabeth, you had mentioned that there are other ways that we can keep people safe. I'm just wondering if you could go into what that is, because as someone who has unvaccinated family members and who won't even be able to be eligible for vaccines until, I'm guessing, September, I mean, that's a large portion of our town that is not able to be vaccinated. And I'm wondering, what do you guys envision as the things that are going to keep the children of Brattleboro and the people with vulnerable health conditions safe? Not just thinking about the average person over, 30 that has gotten the chance to be fully vaccinated, but what about the people in those other three categories that you named at the beginning of this conversation?
Thank you, Robin. Trevor? Trevor, what's your full name, please?
Sorry, Trevor Houle.
Wolf, did you say?
Houle? Like
Thanks.
pool with an H.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, go
You're
ahead, please.
I just think that this comes down to personal choice. If a business wants to enforce a mask mandate, then they can enforce a mask mandate. Back to what Tim says, what is the power of municipal government? We've talked about trusting the science all the way through to this point and believing in science all the way through to this point. And science is now saying that it's safe and that we should be opening up our communities, and masks for unvaccinated people are not a necessary precaution anymore. And quite frankly, it boggles my mind that this is a conversation that is so in depth. And I see Jessica shaking her head, but I hear you about the children. And if you're someone who chooses to have their children wear a mask, have them wear a mask. If you're an adult who's vaccinated and you choose to wear a mask, choose to wear a mask. Myself, being vaccinated, the science says I don't need to wear a mask. So why should the town of Brattleboro say that I do? Thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify that unvaccinated people should still continue to wear masks. That's what the CDC guidance says. So let's not get off track on that matter. And again, there are people who are not vaccinated. So the question remains, do we want to do this now? Do we want to do this in 2 more weeks? Do we want to do this on the 4th of July? Do we want to do this in September? I mean, that's the range I'm hearing from our discussion. And I think we just need to kind of rein that in and be a little bit more focused about what we want to do tonight. And I'm getting some head nods on that. But so Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, so thank you to all the public participants. Jess, I haven't actually spoken since you've spoken, and I really want to thank you for all of the community work you've done on this. I think it's really important, and the perspectives that you've brought, I've really listened to. I think, Liz, it makes a lot of sense to maybe decide on a date and have that not be tomorrow, so that people have an opportunity to know that this is coming. And so businesses have an opportunity to decide what they're going to do. So that's and also, maybe that's a little bit of the stepped thing that I was thinking about, that we don't just get a CDC announcement on a Friday. Oh, well, now this is okay. Mm-hmm. If Brattleboro says, okay, we're going to move to revoke the mask order, and it's going to be on this date, so that people are ready for it. That I would be in support of. And I think it's an important step, and I think it's going to take patience, and it's going to take empathy, and understanding that this community has shown throughout this pandemic, has shown that we have that capacity to be patient and empathetic towards each other. And it's going to continue. We're going to continue to need that. And so I really, I have a lot of faith in Brattleboro to be able to do that. So I would say 2 weeks, or I don't know. I'm not really sure what day it should be.
Daniel?
About a month back, I was expecting us to end up in a conversation like this, and I tried to figure out some sort of metric that would help me understand when it was appropriate to let this order go. And so at the time, I had the number 70% in mind for the county, and we're actually at 70% today, give or take a couple of points of a percent. And the governor has set this metric of 80%, and it is that metric will determine when all of the state's restrictions end. So my question really is, like, once that happens, which will happen before we meet again, barring some crazy circumstance, once that happens, where does our order lie then? So I don't know if Peter has any knowledge about that, or anyone else on the board.
Yes, Peter.
So it depends on what action the governor takes when we hit the 80% threshold. The way I've mainly heard that described is the end of any state imposed restrictions. So I think that speaks to things like, right now there are quite high numbers for outdoor gatherings. I think it's unlimited vaccinated people and 900 unvaccinated, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's a high number. And so the idea is that something like that would just go away. There would be no limits any longer on outdoor gathering. That's distinct from terminating the state of emergency order. And we really haven't heard the governor talk much about that. And I would be surprised, because of some of the other potential implications of eliminating the state of emergency order. I would be surprised if that goes away at the same time as all the restrictions, but I don't know. We'll find out together when the governor makes the announcement of what actually is the decision from the state upon the 80% threshold. And you're right that it's likely to happen before the June 15th select board meeting. That number is getting quite close now. So how that affects this order is, if the state of emergency remains in effect, unless there is some other direct action taken by the state to nullify orders like this that have been imposed locally, then under the state of emergency, your action to impose this in Brattleboro would remain in effect. But if the governor, as in taking away the restrictions, also takes away the state of emergency, then that act would immediately nullify this face covering order.
Mm-hmm. My understanding, like when we originally were given the authority, right? Because we don't usually actually have this kind of authority. It was because of executive order.
Correct.
Which is a product of state of emergency and the governor's ability to do these kinds of things. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't mind us waiting until a date certain, I guess, or some sort of metric certain. I do understand like people's concerns around folks who haven't been able to get vaccinated yet. I'm not blind to that. I'm also not blind to the current inconsistency between our order and the CDC and state guidance. And, I too, Jessica, have been talking to lots of people. I've been talking to people who are the frontline staff in their own business. Many of our Main Street stores are owned and operated. I've been talking with those folks, and I've been talking with staff in larger places like the co-op, and there are mixed feelings. I reached out to the DBA and the chamber a couple of weeks back when the CDC guidance changed, because I figured, those folks had opinions about it last time. I suspect they'll have opinions again. And they sent us survey data, as you've all seen. And as you know, there are mixed feelings. It's about as 50-50 as you could get, I would say. So I think that, you know, you could make an argument for rescinding it as of today. You know, that would be the simplest. Or you could say, we'll do it at our next meeting, but it will go. You know, and when it goes, like I say, I don't think when it goes, the community will be like, oh, great, get rid of this. You know, the vast majority of people are going to do what is comfortable for them. And for many of them, given the last 15 months, that's going to be, I'm going to hold on to my mask for a while longer. You know, so I don't think that the town's order necessarily is what's driving people's masking behavior. And so whether it's needed anymore, I don't know. But I'm not against the idea of holding on for a couple more weeks.
I have a thought, and that is, well, first of all, I think the most important thing is this, we're at almost 80%. And in 2 weeks' time, I'm sure that the state will be at 80%. And so that's where the science is dictating that there's some sort of a herd immunity. And that's why the cases have gone down. And that's why I would feel comfortable in, like, let's say we had a June 15th or June 14th, that's our next meeting, deadline, 15th. Because that would give people an opportunity to kind of settle their business and know this is coming, and, you know, have heart-to-hearts with their employer. Children would figure out, you know, with their parents what to do. I know camps are opening and so forth. So, you know, the world is opening and people have to find their place in it. But I think that what the CDC and the governor is telling us is that herd immunity is right around the corner. So I would be comfortable with a June 15th release. Jessica, you want to say something?
Just a little point of clarification. We're at between 70 and 80% of people that are eligible for the vaccine to have been vaccinated with one shot. That's not fully vaccinated. And also that doesn't count the population that is under 12. So really, I think the number for where we're at with fully vaccinated percentage of our entire population is closer to about 50%. And the CDC recommends 70% of the community vaccination is what threshold is needed for herd immunity within a community.
Any other select board members want to weigh in before I ask the public to speak again?
Maybe after we take, I'd like to say something after we take.
Right. Gary, it's your second shot at the podium, so enter and weigh in.
My second shot at the title, huh?
What about fire?
You have somebody above.
Let's let FAR, because FAR hasn't gone yet.
You had fire tablet first, and then Gary, and then FAR.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, all right, Mr. Fire Tablet. Okay.
Oh, I'm ready. Yeah, I had to put a helmet on because I was banging my head against the wall. You know, I've been listening to this conversation, and at the start of the conversation, I hear 4 select board people saying that I think we should lift the order, and 20 minutes later, we're going to push it out 2 more weeks. Like that's the magic number. And listening to Daniel saying, you know, if we lift the order today, there's still going to be people wearing masks tomorrow. And I agree with him. And moving the date out 2 weeks, there are still going to be if you lift it on the 15th, which is my birthday, by the way, so don't be afraid to send me a card. If you lift it on the 15th, things are not going to change. People are still going to wear masks until they feel comfortable, and they may never feel comfortable. You're not going to change that regardless of what day you vote on this. Now, I have a business, and I've spoken to every one of you, and over the weekend, more people came in and said, am I required to wear a mask? I am no longer going to be the mask police in Brattleboro. If you feel strongly about pushing this out 2 more weeks and somebody comes in without a mask, I'm going to let them come in without a mask. There's no penalty for it. And if you feel that strongly that we should continue to wear masks, then there should be some penalty for it. And have the police looking for people not wearing masks and then give them a citation to pay some sort of fine. But to continue this, when the business community, and I disagree with Daniel, the business community is, I believe, about 70-30 or even higher to get rid of the mask mandate. And so listening to 4 of you, and I knew where Jessica was, and I applaud her for her stand and not caving to, people putting pressure on her to say we should get rid of the mask mandate. But the 4 of you where I'm saying, hey, this is going away. Tomorrow we can take down our signs and allow people to come in with masks, allow employees, if they want to wear masks, they get to wear them, to, okay, we're going to push this off 2 more weeks. When in reality, nothing is changing in 2 more weeks, and there will continue to be more and more frustration with the business community that asked you in the first place to help them out and protect them. And now they're going to be frustrated with you because you are pushing this off, and everybody knows about this discussion. So to say that the community is unaware of this discussion, you are really naive, because the Chamber of Commerce and DBA have done a great job in getting out to all the people on social media to have a discussion about how people feel. And regardless of what the issue is, you're never going to get 100% either way. And so I am really disappointed if you push this off to the 15th, because nothing is going to change by the 15th. Yes, the numbers go up. And listening to Mike Pichuk this evening on the news, they think that they're going to get to the number that they're looking for by June 10th or 11th, which is 3 or 5 days before you meet. And when you look at the science, and you keep talking about science, and you look at what's happening in Brattleboro, it is really non-existent for cases. And yet you are saying that you're the new CDC in Brattleboro and saying, we're going to put this off, we're going to put this off, when the actual numbers say we should do away with this. And oh, by the way, that if there is a spike, which I'm doubting it would happen, you have the opportunity to hold an emergency meeting and say, we're putting the mask mandate in place because we have a spike. There were a lot of people around in the fall and late summer, and we did not see a spike in Brattleboro. There was heavy traffic in the fall foliage season from tourists, and the business community is thankful for that, and there wasn't a spike. There are not as many people around right now, but we're hoping there will be soon as the weather changes. And I think that we're out of step, and we should try to get in step. Massachusetts, which has lower numbers than us, over the weekend, Saturday, I believe, there are no more restrictions in Massachusetts. And we're in better position than them, and we're saying we're going to continue to wear masks. So I hope that you change your mind and say, you know what, let's go what we were all originally talking about here this evening and do away with the mask order. We can always go back to it. Always remember that. We can always go back to it. Thank you.
Gary Stroud.
Well, actually far, but Might as well be short. and
Just
sweet.
say it, Gary.
I'm going to say it like it is. I agree and I disagree. So I guess that's a good thing. I agree we should open, but I disagree because like Jessica was saying about the kids, but if you put something in place that's going to protect the kids, summer school, everything else, we're golden. Let's get everybody inoculated, get people moving forward. That's an important issue. As my grandmother would say, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So I guess the sooner we get this going, the sooner we make things happen, we'll be back to whatever you determine what normalcy is. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Far?
Hi, all. Thanks. I'll try to be a little more brief than Mr. DeGray, but yeah, I want to reiterate some of what Jessica was just saying. Not just that, but yeah, I keep hearing y'all talking about this 70% or 80% benchmark, and again, that's only people who've gotten the first shot at this point. I'm 47 years old. It's only been a week that I've been fully vaccinated, and it's been 2 weeks since I've gotten my second shot. My partner here is 41 years old. She just today is becoming fully vaccinated. So if we're talking about timing, we're in our 40s, and we busted our butts to actually get dates to get those vaccines as early as we did. I had to travel across the state to make it happen. So, it's not like this is something that's, a clearly like it's time, like we've like gone through all these steps and we're definitely there. Like some of us are just getting there. We're old. I think we're old anyway. I kind of feel old. And certainly lots of people that are younger than us are in no position to feel like they're like, they're in the clear. And I don't think we're anywhere, like the 70% number, just as long as we're talking about masks, we should not be using those numbers because that's not what's relevant to the wearing of masks. So yeah, I hope that, y'all will have some conversation about what the timeline is, but I definitely hope that it isn't immediate. Thanks.
All right. Tim, did you want to speak after the public has spoken?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to just say something because it seems that people have embraced this idea of herd immunity, but I've been following the science pretty closely, and what's happening is not herd immunity. In fact, it's not really certain that we'll ever get to what science believes herd immunity is with COVID-19 because of the variants and the way it's changing shape. These new variants are less deadly, despite what you may see on the news. All the data points to this. It's more transmissible, certainly, but that's the way it works. The virus finds ways to survive. And if that way to survive is to infect more kids, but not to kill people, that's the strategy it takes. And there's something that it's a new concept that it's called tipping point. And Israel saw this when they vaccinated 60% of their residents. They saw an incredible drop in transmission and deaths and negative outcomes. So I think it's just a shift that we have to take. We have to look at the numbers, and over again, it seems like we've reached that tipping point. And that's why the CDC very clumsily, this whole order with only people who are fully vaccinated should, it really should have been communicated better, I think. But there's a situation going on now where what's the old expression? The barn doors can't be closed after the horse has bolted. It really is. We are surrounded by a lifting of mandates. Every state around us, Dover just lifted theirs, Massachusetts lifted theirs, and as Dick was pointing out, they're behind us substantially on vaccination rates. So I understand that we didn't really fully, we went through this. Dick makes a good point that we had basically 4 people interested in lifting the mandate, but we didn't upfront talk about timing. But I was pretty sure that we were on an immediate timeline. So, you know, I'm not sure when it comes to saying that people don't have to wear masks inside Brattleboro, that people need a ramp up period of 2 weeks. I don't really get that. So I'd like to make a motion to lift Brattleboro's mask order as of June 4th, which is this Friday, 2021. And we'll see how the vote goes.
All right. Tim has made a motion to lift the mask order by Friday, June 4th. All in favor of that motion, all select board members, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And all not in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so we have 4-1 vote and the motion has passed. And I thank you all for this discussion. And our next discussion is similar, but not matching. The next discussion is what to do about select board meetings. And our choices are continue on Zoom as we have for over a year, have in-person meetings, or have some sort of hybrid. And I'd like Peter to address the hybrid issue. But first, I just have a couple things to say. I think we all need to understand that these meetings are of long duration. And if we're proposing to have them indoors, they're indoors of long duration. The other thing about Zoom, which we may not like, but we're getting used to, is that there's two aspects. First, it provides us with increased access. More people are participating, and that's a factor to consider. The other factor to consider is that it provides us select board members with flexibility, and also to the public. If there's people who are traveling finally to visit family over the summer, they can still log on and we can all participate in the select board meeting. So I think that's just like a hidden bonus of Zoom that we should perhaps take advantage of while we can, because at some point the governor's going to say no more Zoom meetings and we will be in person. But whether or not we want to do that now, we can all decide. But the thing that I really want Peter to weigh in is, Peter, would you explain to us what the problems are with a hybrid type technology?
So we'll need to formulate a plan for how to have hybrid meetings. I believe that there will come a time, whatever the select board decides tonight, there's very likely to be a time when we move to hybrid as opposed to just in person like it was before COVID. And there are jurisdictions that are ahead of us in that. So there's some things we can learn from seeing how, what they've tried and what's worked and what hasn't worked. One challenge that we're going to have, regardless of what we learn from other people's experiences, is just the current, I'll use a very technical term, clunkiness of our select board meeting room and technology setup. So as you all know, and the community is aware, we're working towards a renovation of the municipal center that's going to have lots of benefits, one of which will be, a meeting room that will be designed for, doing video conferencing. And so there'll be a variety of different ways in which that's useful to town government. One of which will be that it'll be designed with an intention of having hybrid meetings. Right now, what we'll probably be using is that large screen television that's already in the select board meeting room. Some work that Patrick and BCTV will do to figure out how to use that in a way that is useful to the board and helpful to the broader public, that allows that continued greater degree of access while still allowing an in-person meeting to function as an in-person meeting, right? There's going to have to be some way in which both things are taken into account. And, so certain kinds of challenges are like, how do we, if we're sitting at the dais in the way that we did before COVID, we're not each in an individual box, right? So on Zoom, how is that going to function in a way that the people who are in the meeting are visible and audible to the people who are on Zoom, and the people who are on Zoom are visible and audible to the people who are in the meeting? These are not insurmountable, but it's something that's going to take a little bit of planning. And as I said, there are some places, particularly I know of a few that are better equipped, that started out with a more modern setup. So it lends itself a little better to that. But I'm sure there are communities also that are making this shift that are, face some of the technological challenges that we do. With a little bit of advance notice, we can put together a plan and show you that plan and see when the select board is comfortable with moving in that direction. I think that to move there before actually developing a plan for hybrid meetings is likely to be pretty chaotic for us. I think we need to do some trial and error outside of select board meeting settings, so that when we're using the tool in select board meeting settings, you can have a greater level of confidence that it's going to go smoothly.
All right, thank you, Peter. Let's hear from Daniel and then Ian.
I think that background from Peter is really helpful for me. I am in favor of us adopting some sort of hybrid that allows the greatest amount of access, and I will be there in person, but like members of the public should not be forced to be there in person, right? Those that wish to be there and feel comfortable doing so, that's fine. And those that for whom they don't feel comfortable, or it's just easier to be doing it from home, I want them to be able to do that. So I would like for us to take the time to build up to a decent hybrid model, rather than like back in their next meeting and figure it out on the fly. Like, let's, maybe we can aim to be back there in mid-July with a good hybrid model going.
Well, I think Peter will need some time. So
yes, well, I don't know about that exact date, but I would say like I'd follow, staff and BCTV's ability to be able to do it properly.
Right. Ian?
After you, Tim.
Oh, no, your hand was up first. It's fine. I was just trying to get in the queue.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I have so much faith in town staff. 2 fully remote town meetings. I think that we're going to be able to figure it out. I think that the future is the hybrid model. It has allowed for accessibility to town function in a way that it wasn't before. It's going to be one of the positives that we take away from COVID, which is great. I think it's something that we can get excited about and get behind. I also really agree that we shouldn't roll it out until we're all ready. So let's give the town time to staff to put together a plan. And I would even be in favor of like, having us all in the room first and still having the meeting remote, or like doing that once and then doing it fully hybrid, or whatever is necessary for us to test it to make it work, so that we eventually get to the place where we're doing it well.
Tim?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, the reason I really pushed for having this discussion was not to set any date certain on doing this, but I knew that pretty much, at least the majority of the board, I'm not sure I've talked to Jess much about this, but that we're all thinking the same way. And just to kind of get it out there, well, what does the rough plan look like? And my rough plan, again, the date is not as important to me as just sort of talking out a little bit of what we feel like the added access that we've learned about through Zoom what's the important part? And I'd throw out there that you can have an in-person meeting. BCTV can do their thing. That feed can be plugged into Zoom, but then there can be, when Liz calls for public participation or any comments, we can literally, turn to Patrick or turn to someone who is assigned to say, yes, we have a couple hands up. If we don't have a couple hands up, then the meeting proceeds as normal. Because remember, it's being broadcast on BCTV as well. That's live or almost live. There's only a few second delay. So I don't think it's that complicated, but it definitely needs to be worked out with BCTV and, probably. And I thought we should have this conversation now because I kind of have a feeling the governor might say, hey, it's time to go back to normal. So we should at least be prepared for that eventuality. Because I think a lot of communities are already just going back to normal without incorporating the added access of Zoom. So I'd like to make sure we're at least in agreement. Sorry, I'm seeing 5 nods. So I think we're all in agreement that we'd love to keep that participation at least on the comment, from people who can't make it to the physical meeting. So.
Peter?
Yeah, so I'd suggest, based on the comments that you all offered, that we bring an update back. I'm not going to say necessarily it'll be the plan, but it might be. I just don't know how complicated this is or isn't. But let's have town staff and BCTV get to work on this and provide you an update at the June 15th select board meeting. And with that additional information, you're either going to provide us some feedback that leads to refining of this, or you're going to look on it and say, well, that sounds pretty good to us. And either way, it kind of is, one more step forward in the process of you being able to make an informed decision about when's the right time to make a change. So
is that enough time?
Yeah, well, my point is, I don't see the point in pushing this out indefinitely or to a farther date, because we'll do some initial assessment and we'll come back to you either concerned that it's going to really require a lot, or feeling pretty good about how simple it looks like it's going to be, or more likely someplace in between those two. And it'll lead to a more informed conversation. What I'm concerned about is trying to formulate something that feels more like a target date, when we conceptually, what I'm hearing, and it's very helpful to hear this, is you want to have hybrid meetings. You don't want to go back into the select board meeting room and just be there. And so I think the next step is for us to start developing how a hybrid meeting would function, so that we can have, maybe at least, maybe it's just next time. I think more likely it's next time and the time after, or, an evolving process. But we get to a place, we get there when we're ready. And when you've determined that you like the hybrid plan, you think that it makes sense, that it's doable and it's going to benefit the public, and we can still maintain orderly meetings. And I can't tell you tonight whether that's a couple of weeks from now or longer. So I think we should just give you an update about how we started and what you get your feedback on that.
Thank you, Peter. Jessica?
Just going to make one request, that if we do in person invite the public into the space, I would love to see similar protocols to performing arts venues for distancing or masks that are currently in place, at least for a little bit as we ease into this.
Yes, I would agree, Jessica. It is an enclosed space being opened to the public, so we could take what appropriate precautions are. So we'll wait to hear back from Peter. Everyone good with that? All right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Gary, Megan, we've agreed to hold this conversation in 2 weeks. You have a quick comment to make, Gary?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I was just thinking Memorial Park. What do you think, Peter? What do you guys think? It's a huge park, a lot of open space, big tent, works down in Washington, D.C. It's a thought. I mean, it's great outdoors. It's summertime.
Thanks for your comment, Gary.
There you go.
Okay, Megan? Megan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry. I think it's a little bit contradictory though that you guys said that it would be okay for you guys to wear masks inside in a closed space, but you're lifting it for the town. Because you even yourself just said, yes, I agree, it's an enclosed space, but then businesses that are, I guess we'll just have to do our own order. I just think it's a little funny. It seemed contradictory.
Okay, Megan, thank you for your comment. All right. Small Business Assistance Program loans. Peter, could you explain that to the public so then we can begin our discussion?
Sure. So there were a number of actions taken early in COVID in the initial weeks as it came on us in March and April of 2020. Some of which staff was able to take, some of which required select board action. One of those that required select board action was to suspend the requirement of Small Business Assistance Program loan recipients to be repaying those loans with monthly due dates for the payment schedule. These were in the days prior to any of the federal relief becoming available for local businesses or any businesses, and it just wasn't clear how devastating the impacts might be to the economy and to particular businesses. And so, we basically the thinking of the board and the way in which we were having that conversation at the time was, we can't provide, large amounts of financial relief to local businesses, but we can help in ways that we can help. And one of the things we can do is for those who have borrowed money from the town, we can tell them right now, you don't need to pay that back right now. We'll start this up again later once we get to a more stable time. And so that went into effect back in, my memo says when, that was actually on March 17th, right away, as the COVID was breaking and all of the restrictions were being first put in place. That the board said we'll defer all payment requirements indefinitely. There have been a couple of times during the past 15 months when you've had brief discussions about this and kind of making note of the fact that it is still in effect and it seems like it's proper to still leave it in effect. When we were having a brief discussion 2 weeks ago to establish this as the night when you would address substantively some of these pending COVID matters as things begin to wind down and open up, agreed that this was one you wanted to visit more substantively. And so more substantively, what I can say about it is there are 8 businesses who have loans that are in the process of being repaid. And of those, 4 have already decided on their own initiative to begin repayment. Presumably because they can afford that and want to be on a schedule that retires that debt sooner so that they can, have that cash flow for their business. But in any event, there's 4 who don't have to be making payments, but are making monthly payments at this time. And there's 4 others who have not resumed monthly payments. And so the question at this point is, does the select board believe this is the time to ask those businesses, which would be asking all 8, so that the 4 who are doing it voluntarily would now be required to, and that the 4 who haven't resumed payments would be required to resume payments. Are you prepared at this time to end the deferment, or do you wish to leave that in effect for some additional period and revisit this later in the summer or some other time?
So, Peter, what was the process then? The town would write to these people and tell them next month's payment would be enforced.
You'd want to give notice for sure so that people see it coming. And so I would think the minimum of that, we're here on June 1st, it just happens by coincidence to be the first of the month. I would think the minimum would be to provide written notice promptly this week to these 8 businesses that payment is expected to resume on July 1st. Or you could target a date that is further away, or you could decide to just continue to kind of watch how things are happening in town and make a decision later around this. There's no good guidance to follow in this regard, because what you did wasn't required. It was your collective best judgment that this was something we could do and should do to help businesses weather the financial storm of COVID. There's been so many different ways in which businesses have been aided, with state and federal aid, as well as, found creative ways to keep going. And yet some have been, more significantly negatively impacted than others. And so, another factor in why some are paying and some are not may be, their own particular business circumstances and wherewithal to make those payments. I don't know that, and you don't know that. So there's just kind of a, I think you want to be careful not to make a decision that is based on information that's too granular. I think you want to be making a decision about what you think is fair to the community, because one other factor here is that while we're, for as long as we allow the deferment to continue, we're not receiving funds back into what is a revolving loan fund. And so the ability of the town to reloan those funds and to help other businesses with growth and recovery is limited. In the best of times, this is not a really large fund, but right now it's a stagnant fund. And so I think you just need to kind of weigh those factors. You may be ready to act on it tonight. You may need some time to think about it, but that's what I think should enter into your decision about when to require that payments resume.
Thank you, Peter. Jessica?
Hey, Peter, I have just 2 questions for you about the program. So I haven't had the delight of discussing this topic before, but everybody else has. So the 2 questions I have, first is, what is the program's capacity limited to right now? And the other question is, do you have a waiting list of applications for this funding that we need to start replenishing quickly to meet those hopes and dreams?
Right. There is no waiting list of applications. These applications tend to come not in batches. It's not like folks make a line. They tend to come occasionally over time, again, back in a more normal economy. The program allows a loan of up to $70,000 to any one particular business. There's currently $340,000 in the fund. So, that's sort of the order of magnitude we're talking about. We don't currently have anybody waiting in line. The fund has at times been as high as $600,000 or $700,000, and at times been as low as a couple of $100,000. We're right now, kind of in the middle of that area.
Peter, I just have a question. If one of these groups has an issue, they can individually negotiate with the town to change the terms of their loan. Is that possible?
That is true. Yeah, there have been times when certain of the folks that had loans under this program ran into financial difficulties and did rework the terms of their loan with the town in order to be able to pay it back, because the original terms were more of a burden than they could bear.
Great. Ian, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, you kind of touched on it, but I can sort of build on that, Liz. I think I recall, Peter, when we sent out letters to people who owed the town money. I'm trying to think of what it was for.
Water bills.
Water bills, there it is. We sent with the letter, besides the fact that, it's time to pay, it was also, hey, come talk to us if you need to discuss a payment plan or something, because it's important for us that this bill gets paid, but also, it's important that we don't put a kind of financial hardship on you. Could that kind of language be included in this letter?
Sure. Absolutely.
Tim?
I was going to sort of suggest the same sort of thing, but in a more, just a slightly different angle. I was going to suggest that we decide it's time to, end the deferment as of July 1st. That's fiscal year, so it seems tidy that way. Gives businesses a chance to, ramp back up, given all the changes that are going on and lifting and hopefully improvement for all of our businesses. And then offer that if they had special circumstances, they could either come before staff or come before us. So it's sort of the same thing. But at first glance, we could treat everybody the same, because we should remember that 4 businesses have already decided to continue, right? That's what you said.
That's correct. One quick clarification there is that if the terms are to be adjusted, that would need to come to you. There's actually a loan committee, the Small Business Assistance Program Committee, that would look at this, at any restructuring or any new applications. They would look at that first and make a recommendation to the select board, who would then act on it.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, just throw it into the ball into their court to actually come to us if there was a serious problem and explain those circumstances.
Daniel, did you want to speak?
No, I'm mulling it over.
Very good. Jessica?
I think that it would be a little more gentle, I guess, to allow until the second quarter of the year for folks to start repaying, but they may opt to start paying before then. They've been deferred for over a year now, so I think that, or about a year now, so I think that it would be difficult to spring this on them for next month, as well as might make more work for us if we have to renegotiate for loans. So I am all for restarting it, but I would love to wait until October at the latest, if we phrase it that way, for folks to start repaying these.
Yeah, I'm not convinced about that. I think July 1st is, I think we've been very generous as a, and our responsibilities to the town are real. Tim, did you raise your hand? Did I see fingers?
Yeah, I was just curious. I was just going to directly interrogate Jess, if that's permitted, as they say at town meeting. Do you have some sort of understanding that a particular business with a loan with the town, has an issue with restarting? Because we don't even know that.
No, I have no idea. I was going to look back and remind myself who they were, but I don't know who they are.
I was just asking.
I don't think, as Peter said, we don't want to get granular. It's like zoning. We want to make a decision that is broad, and in so doing, we are fair, because we're not playing favorites or anything like that. Even knowing it is not good.
I was just asking because it would affect my opinion if I knew that she had some
Peter
inside information.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I did offer that earlier, and I appreciate, Liz, you reiterating it. I do think it's the right way to be thinking about this decision is from the policy perspective, as opposed to the particular loan relationship perspective. And I especially feel that way because of this idea that has been introduced into the conversation, I think from you, Ian, but now has been embraced, I think, pretty well by everybody, that yes, of course, if somebody needs a restructuring, we would work with them to do a restructuring. The whole point of this program is to help local businesses either to start or to grow. And so, nobody is going to be denied the opportunity to rework their loan to make sure that this program is actually helpful, rather than, a straw that breaks the camel's back. That's not the intent here at all.
Yes, Daniel.
So with that in mind, I do think October's too far out, but maybe July is a little too soon, given that we don't quite know what the challenges are of those 4 that are currently deferring. So what if we said August 1st? But August 1st, and we reach out this week giving them ample time to restructure, to budget, if necessary.
That seems like a
Daniel
good,
with his horse trading again.
There we
That
go. A
seems
little
like a
horse
Love
trading.
it. Making the
good
sausage.
compromise to me.
Coming in for the win.
Daniel, you want to turn that into a motion?
Sure, on the fly. Let's see. Let me look at the administrative report.
Can I help you?
Sure.
May I help you?
It pains
Yes,
Peter to
you
have
can
us
and you may.
wandering around.
I think the motion you want to make is to discontinue the deferment on the required repayment of small business assistance program loans effective August 1st, 2021, with staff instructed to send a letter to the 8 businesses that are currently repaying loans.
Participants.
To the 8 affected businesses to send that letter by June 4th, and to include in the letter the explicit willingness of the town to restructure loans if necessary.
So moved.
Daniel has made a motion based on Peter's suggested language. All select board members in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And
All
Peter,
right.
make sure to thank the ones that have started repaying, give them a couple
Daniel?
thin mints or something.
Did you have another thing to say, Daniel?
I just wanted to bring up the one other sort of decision that we took early on was around water and sewer disconnections. And there is currently a moratorium in place for involuntary utility connections through regulated utilities at the Public Utility Commission. Municipal water systems don't come under that. So it was simply an act that we took. And I'm not saying that I don't want to do anything about it tonight because it's not warned, but I want to at least start thinking about that. I find that more challenging because I see the other end of like the assistance piece and know that a lot of that stuff is still moving slowly. And I don't want to see people shut off just because the state programs are moving too slow. But I would like to talk about it at some point in the next meeting or two.
Very good. Tim?
I was just going to ask for clarification. I think we kept it in place for individuals, but not businesses, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
Partway through, we removed that from businesses because there were only a couple of businesses that had taken advantage of that, and one in particular, and it was distorting the finances of the fund. And so from a business point of view, we went back to normal operations, but the moratorium remains in place for residential customers. Would you like us to bring some information about that to the next meeting when we bring some information about hybrid meetings, so that it's in neither case would it necessarily be directed towards action, but just by way of continuing on, examination.
Information. Sounds good to me. Ian?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of do the same structure, a COVID
matters
with enumerated points on like what are we talking about this week, and why we really shouldn't talk about that this week because it wasn't on the agenda. But I appreciate Daniel bringing it up.
Okay, everyone. Item C.
Yay.
Memorandum of Understanding with the New England Police Benevolent Association due to recent schedule change. Peter, would you like to bring that to the fore?
I would, and Acting Chief Kerrigan is also in the meeting, and he'll speak to the details of the schedule change. I would just like to recommend your approval of the Memorandum of Understanding that is before you. The schedule change, as Chief will speak to, is the result of the fact that we've had several folks leave the department And we're not able to replace as quickly as folks have left. And so this is a phenomenon that's being experienced to varying degrees in police departments across the country. The particular impact here is that we just had too many people working too many hours of overtime in order to keep the old staffing model in place. And we became very concerned about the degree to which this is burning out employees, overburdening the individual police officers and their families, and then also, causing there to be very tired police officers out on the street. We expect a lot of these folks. We want to be making sure that they're able to get proper rest and have proper work-life balance in order to be able to not get personally burned out and continue to serve the community in an excellent manner that we've come to expect. And so that was the basis for the change that has been made. Mark will speak to that change. In the change, in the implementation of the change, it requires that our contractual relationship with the officers be tweaked just slightly. The financial impact of this actually is going to be cost savings to the town, but that is not the motivation for the change. But in the implementation of this, there's a few different things that need to be reflected in this memorandum of understanding so that the payment of the individual officers through the collective bargaining agreement can be done in a clear and fair manner.
Great. Let's hear from Interim Chief Mark Kerrigan.
Thank you, Peter. You articulated very well the motivation behind this change. I'll just speak a little bit to operationally how it's going to affect the police department and also the services that will be applying to the town or providing to the town. As you know, you probably have all seen a memo that I submitted outlining the reasons for this schedule and the service change. I want to take a few minutes to just talk about that for the benefit of the public that might still be listening to us, and also for folks that might not have read my memo. Like Peter said, our department has been relatively short-staffed for some time now, but over the past 6 months, maybe a year, our staffing has continued to decline as additional officers have resigned and left the department. Currently, our overall strength is at less than 2/3. We have 17 of an authorized 27 officers. Obviously, all of those officers are not assigned to patrol duties, such as myself. I'm not assigned as a patrol officer. We have detectives that aren't. And while that staff, including myself, will occasionally work shifts, our patrol staff, while the whole department is at about 2/3 strength, our patrol staff is just over half strength right now. So when we're this short-staffed, as Peter said, officers are forced to work quite a bit of overtime. If folks don't volunteer to work overtime, then they're assigned on a rotating basis to involuntarily work assigned overtime shifts. That's fine for a brief period of time. Police officers know when they come into this job, when they take this job, that sometimes long and unusual work hours are going to be part of the package. But that said, it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model that can be endured by any organization really for a long period of time, for months and years on end. Involuntary overtime results in officers that work double shifts, up to 16 hours in some cases. Vacations are sometimes canceled if folks have to call in sick because there are no additional officers to cover for sick officers. Vacations are denied in some circumstances. Officers end up working on scheduled days off, and it just results in a terrible work-life balance. Officers aren't able to take time off to sort of rest, recharge their batteries, reconnect with their loved ones. They work tired. Their personal relationships significantly suffer with their families and friends. And their mental and physical health can suffer. This can manifest itself in a variety of ways, both physically and mentally. The model that our officers have been enduring for some time now is harming them. The requirements that we place on them are causing them harm. So up to this point in time, over the years, the people of Brattleboro have not seen any reduction in service as a result of the struggle that our officers are enduring with this. Officers continue to work, they continue to serve, they respond quickly, efficiently to calls for service. I'm pleased to say, very often with smiles on their faces. But that said, it wouldn't be responsible of me as their leader to just sort of sit idly by and watch as they endure this and as they're harmed by the workload and the scheduling demands that we place on them. My greatest responsibility, certainly one of my top responsibilities, is to do my best to ensure that the officers that come and work for me go home in the same physical and mental condition that they came to work in, the same health, both physically and mentally, that they came, maybe even better. So having said all that, to that end, we've switched to a new staffing model that's more centered around 2 shifts rather than the traditional first shift, second shift, overnight shift. We'll always respond to life-threatening emergencies. That is not going to change. But it's important for you as the select board to know, and for the community to know, that there will be some hours of the day or night where there are no police officers patrolling our community, proactively out in the community. Non-emergency incidents will very often be handled over the telephone. Some calls for service that residents feel should receive an immediate physical response may not receive one if it's not a life-threatening circumstance, and the response could be delayed. Life-threatening calls, as I said, will always be physically responded to, but there may be a delay as additional officers are called into duty from home to respond to those emergencies. So in order to reduce the potential impacts on public safety, we still take our role in that regard very seriously here. We've done some analysis, some fairly in-depth analysis of call volume based on different types of calls, the times of day, the days of the week, to help determine when we can sort of implement these changes during the day to have the least detrimental effect on public safety. I'm optimistic that Brattleboro will, currently is and will remain a generally safe place to be, to live, to work, to learn, do all of the socializing and recreation that everybody enjoys doing. We're certainly going to closely monitor any changes that occur as we implement these changes that occur in crime trends and so on and so forth, so that we can try to be as nimble as possible and make adjustments that might be needed to have this have the least impact on the community as possible. That is it in a nutshell, how operationally we're going to be working through this. We're not going to be releasing information related to exactly what changes are going to be, exactly what calls we will and won't be responding to, exactly what times of day and night and what days these changes will be, for obvious reasons related to public safety. So thank you for that, for the time and for letting me address some of these things. I'd be happy to try and answer any of the questions that you guys might have or that the public may have.
Thank you, Mark.
Add one quick thing. I'm sorry, Liz, may I add one quick thing before you?
Of course.
Thank you. Now, I just wanted to credit Mark and the lieutenants and sergeants for the collaboration around this schedule change, and the officers for fully embracing it. There was a tremendous amount of collaboration that led to this. And I think that's a really important part of the recognition of how difficult the time has been to try to maintain the 3-shift model. That as the idea emerged that a 2-shift model could be implemented in a way that would have only a limited reduction in coverage and a significant benefit for the officers, that everyone was able to really rally around that together. It also made getting together in the collective bargaining environment to work out the few things that are in this memorandum of understanding for your consideration tonight, a really simple matter that, again, was characterized by collaboration between the town administration and the police officers. So.
Well, thank you for that, Peter. Are there members of the select board who have comments or questions? Daniel?
Thanks. So, Mark, I wonder if you could sort of give the public the gist of how long a typical shift for an officer is, and then how long those shifts have been going when they've been doing overtime. In speaking to a few people, it was clear that there wasn't, much understanding around that.
Sure. So the traditional many different departments have different models. Our traditional model over the year has been that officers work 4 10-hour days per week. That's their 40-hour work week. It's not a straight 4 and 3 where you might work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then be off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It rotates over a 5-week cycle that would probably take me another 45 minutes to explain accurately. But what ends up happening is in any given 7-day period, an officer works 4 days and they're off for 3. The way that overtime would work is if there were a vacancy on a shift before or after that officer's shift, they would have to come in early to cover their previous shift, usually half of it. And then they would be could be held into their next shift as well, potentially up to half of it. The maximum that we would allow officers to work years ago, when I first started, it was 20 hours. The most you could work was a 20-hour shift, which is frankly dangerous. And probably maybe 10 years ago or so, I would say we shortened it to 16, which is still a stretch. You're pretty tired after pushing a cruiser around town for 16 hours. We shortened it to 16 hours. One of the things that was sort of an impetus to this is we were getting to a point where we didn't have enough officers to ensure that the maximum amount of overtime an officer would work would be 16 hours. So that was one of the things that started, of several things that started these sort of collaborative conversations that Peter mentioned.
Thank you. I think it's important for folks to understand that if we want our police department to be doing a great job in town, that they do need to be working hours that are humane. And I work a 7.5 hour day, Mark, and sometimes my 7.5 hours can be pretty grueling. And maybe on a Tuesday with the select board meeting on the end of it, that's pretty rough. But that's nothing compared to the kind of hours you're talking about and the kind of work that the officers are out there doing. So I want the officers to know that, I really support this schedule change. And I hope that we'll continue to kind of track the calls that come in during these more reduced hours times so we can kind of see patterns, and maybe, recalibrate if needs be as goes along. But yeah, I think it's really important that our officers are well rested and, able to do the job to the maximum of their ability.
I don't know who raised their hand first, so I'll go with Jess.
All right, thanks, Liz. I think it was Ian, but Mark, I just want to express extreme gratitude for you and for the police force, how you've been working and the conditions that you guys have been working on for the last several months. I can't imagine the stress and the heartache of missing those times with family and vacations and the difficulty of working long shifts. And I'm so excited to see that there is a solution and a wonderful creative solution that you've created. And so I'm very grateful to you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Ian?
Yeah, Mark's just going to pile on the praise. No, clearly, I want to express gratitude to our officers, our town employees who have been working to try to make the 3-shift setup work, clearly at self-sacrifice. And I also want to express gratitude towards you and the other leaders in the department for recognizing that issue and working and having the flexibility to come up with a creative solution. I think I'm really grateful that we have one, and I'm glad to hear that there's going to be that we're going to look at it as we implement it. But no, I'm just very grateful for it and for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Tim?
Oh, I'm just left speechless because my fellow members have already said what I wanted to say, but I'll just reiterate that I just feel like taking care of town staff is one of the primary duties of the select board. When I saw this very important memorandum of understanding on the agenda, I of course thought, wow, this is really the most important thing we'll be doing tonight. It won't make the headlines probably like masks might, but I want to make it very clear that that I support our officers as members of our community and town employees, and really appreciate your leadership around this and the spirit of collaboration that obviously has already happened. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tim. Daniel?
Oh, no.
All right.
I think it's
Well,
your
then
turn.
let me just say that I too appreciate not only the police officers and the hard work that they do, but the stress that they're under, and that the solution will seek to alleviate some of that stress in an already stressful job. And, this, as your really well-written memo pointed out, this is a sustained period of concern that we all have for their labor hours. And I liked the word that Dina used before about humane. I mean, we really need to recognize that the police department is under a lot of stress, and I commend you for the solution. So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
That being
got a motion.
said, we could have a motion.
Yeah, I got one.
Great.
Let's see. I move to approve the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, effective May 23rd, 2021, between the town of Brattleboro and New England Police Benevolent Association Local 412, and to authorize the town manager to execute the MOU on behalf of the town.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel has made a motion to approve the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, effective May 23rd, 2021, between the town of Brattleboro and New England Police Benevolent Association Local 412, and two, to authorize the town manager to execute the MOU on behalf of the town. So, all select board members in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 And that has carried 5-0. And Mark, again, we thank you and applaud your work.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Item D. And I will add, it is the last item. Retain executive search firm for town manager recruitment. Mr. Elba?
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to recommend that the select board authorize that we retain the firm of the Mercer Group Incorporated. Ellis Hankins is senior vice president with the Mercer Group, and he led the recent successful search process for the new executive director of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I sit on that board, as you know. So I came to know Ellis and his work through that process, and was impressed by the quality of what he personally brought to it, and also how well he coordinated with the league board and the league staff and the overall process involved in that recruitment. The main benefit of using an executive recruitment firm for this kind of an important search is the national reach that they have. So there is a benefit to the fact that he will help us through the various stages of vetting applicants and coordinate the processes that we undertake and that you lead to your decision in the hiring of a new town manager. That will be helpful. It will add value, but much of that could be done locally. What we can't do locally is reach out to a national audience to do targeted recruitment to make sure that we have, for your consideration, a diverse applicant pool and a very strong, well-qualified applicant pool. Someone like Ellis, what they do for a living is ensure that happens, that in fact we get not just the applications from people who see our advertisement and are interested, but also the legwork required to go out and make sure that the opportunity to come to Brattleboro and be the town manager here is in front of folks who, really do broaden our applicant pool and potentially bring really excellent experience to the town. So, so it's for that reason that I think for this search, which is a fortunately pretty rare event, and one of great importance for us as a community, I think it's really the right thing for the board to hire a firm such as the Mercer Group. And I personally can recommend the Mercer Group in particular and Ellis in particular, based on the recent experience here in Vermont, where I saw him bring, a diverse applicant pool professional base into a Vermont competitive process. It turns out in that particular Vermont competitive process that a Vermonter was selected, but we wanted to be able to see the folks who were interested from away and be able to see in the end that research that the best qualified person was in fact somebody who was already in the state working for state government at that time with extensive experience working with local governments. But so there's no telling exactly where we'll land with this, but I believe that we can be confident of landing in a better place with a more robust set of applicants for you to choose from if we retain the Mercer Group. There are a couple of questions for tonight. The main question is the decision to retain. A secondary question was, are we retaining for a limited scope of services or the full scope of services? The proposal that we've received from Mercer Group presents it in two different ways. And based on some additional communication with Ellis Hankins and with town staff, our staff recommendation to you as board is to retain the Mercer Group for the full scope of services. The difference is about $5,000 in the cost. It's a difference between $16,000 plus $16,000 of fee plus up to $3,500 worth of reimbursed expenses. That for the limited scope versus $20,500 for the fee and not to exceed $5,500 for the reimbursed expenses. For the full scope, we believe that there's substantial additional value added by engaging for the full scope and that the cost is affordable. So we recommend that you approve that.
Great. Well, let me just start because why not? I think this was an excellent proposal, and I understand that this is a distinct specialty that the town needs, and that we've charged Peter with finding an excellent replacement, and this is how he chooses to go forward. Recommendation, and I'm fully in support of that for the full scope. Daniel?
Yeah, same. I'm also very happy to sign on for the full scope of services. I think that a dollar saved at this point would be unwise, and I would much rather that we engage fully with this very experienced professional firm who's able to do this work, so that when we, the 5 volunteerish select board members, are faced with making this difficult decision, we will have a really great roster of candidates to pick from. I have spoken with a couple of former select board members who were involved in the search for our current town manager and learned just how difficult it can be. So we need all the help that we can get, and I'm very happy to sign on with the Mercer Group.
Jessica?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely the most important thing that we're going to do this year, to have a new leader that will carry our values and our work forward. And I think that it's really important to do it right, and hiring a contractor will definitely bring the expertise that we may not have as select board members. I was a little disheartened that we didn't explore other possibilities or opportunities in contractors, but they provided a really thorough application, and I looked into several of the candidates that they had recruited for other communities, and I was very impressed with the values of those folks and the way they presented themselves. So I'm really excited to support.
Great. Ian,
I've got a motion.
Oh.
Unless, am I?
No, I'm full support of what everyone said. So thank
okay,
you.
go ahead, Ian.
All right. Oh, it's got options. Okay. I move to approve the proposal dated May 25th, 2021 from the Mercer Group, Inc., including the selection of scope of services option A, soup to nuts, which provides for a fee of $20,500 and a reimbursement of expenses not to exceed $5,500.
Great. Ian has made a motion to approve the proposal dated May 25th, 2021 from the Mercer Group, Inc., including the selection of scope of services option A, which provides for a fee of $20,500 and reimbursement of expenses not to exceed $5,500. All select board members in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
The motion has carried 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter.
Fingers crossed.
There's just one more motion that I'm looking for.
Oh, we're all done? I haven't made a motion, so I move to adjourn.
It's your big chance, Jim.
I know. I move to adjourn.
Great. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Peter. Thank you, staff. Thank you, interpreters. Thank you, newspapermen. Good night.